Chapter 42. The main hall of the Divine Weapon Pavilion was majestic and majestic. Resplendent lights illuminated the entire hall, and on the various counters, there were all sorts of divine weapons and treasures. The main hall of the Divine Weapon Pavilion was extremely spacious and had 3 levels. On average, there were tens of thousands of people entering and exiting it every day. At this moment, outside the main hall of the Divine Weapon Pavilion, a young man clad in white robes stepped in. In his hands was a flask of wine, and his body exuded the smell of alcohol. Immortal drunken wine, are you here to look for treasures again? Do you want to come and take a look? Immortal drunken wine, come, let me see how many mouthfuls of wine are left in your flask. The moment the young man stepped into the Divine Weapon Pavilion, there were already people laughing and joking with him. Evidently, he was a frequent customer. If someone wants to invite me for a drink, look for me again. The young man revealed a smile as he walked towards the second level of the Divine Weapon Pavilion. Laughter rang out from the crowd as many people sighed inwardly. A talented and amiable young man like Immortal Drunken Wine was truly too rare nowadays. Immortal Drunken Wine was one of the 10 prodigies of the royal capital. His talent was extremely high, and his swordsmanship was astonishing. Although he rarely used his sword, everyone in the royal capital knew of him. Immortal Drunken Wine's swordsmanship was as good as his alcohol tolerance. It was said that there were people who saw him dancing with his sword when he was drunk, resembling an immortal. As for his real name, not many people remembered it. Immortal Drunken Wine had another hobby, which was to collect swords. Hence, he often came to the Divine Weapon Pavilion. On the second level of the Divine Weapon Pavilion, Immortal Drunken Wine walked straight to the place where swords were sold. On the wall, there were all sorts of sword hilts. You want to see the new ones, right? A beautiful maid stood in front of the wall and smiled at Immortal Drunken Wine. After which, she took down a few swords from the wall and passed them to Wine Sword Immortal. These are all newly forged swords, and they are all second-level mid-grade and high-grade. Immortal Drunken Wine looked at them one by one and smiled. I'll come again next time. The maid seemed to be used to this and didn't try to persuade him. At this moment, a sword apprentice brought 3 swords over and said, Sister Jianwu, these are the newly forged divine weapons. Take them. Okay. Jianwu took a look and infused her elemental energy into them. She then raised her head and looked at Wine Sword Immortal. These 3 swords are all second-level swords, but they aren't as good as the previous ones. Let me see. Wine Sword Immortal drank a mouthful of wine and received the 3 swords. Testing them one by one, he shook his head and pointed at the seemingly ordinary sword on the left. What's the price for this sword? A second-level low-grade sword. If you want it, you can have it for a second-layer Yuan Meteor Stone. Jianwu smiled. As for the second-layer Yuan Meteor Stone she was referring to, it was naturally the standard Yuan Meteor Stone. Yuan Meteor Stones were used for cultivation purposes, and could even aid stellar martial cultivators in forming an innate connection with their constellations. In the Tianwu continent, Yuan Meteor Stones were considered a high-grade currency. They were meteorites that fell from the heavens, and these meteorites were naturally irregularly dropped. Sometimes, a complete Yuan Meteor Stone would be equivalent to an incomparably valuable star ore, and after being polished and cut into pieces, they would be made into the standard size of Yuan Meteor Stones. Yuan stones, which contain the Yuan energy of heaven and earth, could also be used as currency. However, it was a low-grade currency. Those who came to the Divine Weapon Pavilion were all wealthy people, and their currency of exchange was usually Yuan Meteor Stones. Okay, I'll take it. Immortal Drunken Wine laughed, as he took out a Yuan Meteor Stone, and handed it over to Jianwu. This caused Jianwu to be stunned. She had thought that Immortal Drunken Wine had casually said this, and hence, she had casually replied. However, the price of a second-layer Yuan Meteor Stone was definitely not low, and yet, Immortal Drunken Wine had directly snatched it away. This caused her to feel that something was amiss. Immortal Drunken Wine, what did you take advantage of this time? Let me take a look. At this moment, a middle-aged man walked over. He was none other than the supervisor elder of the second level of the Divine Weapon Pavilion. Old Chun, take a look. Immortal Drunken Wine tossed the sword over to the supervisor elder, Yang Chen. Yang Chen received the sword and infused the astral energy in his body into it. Gradually, his countenance became extremely fascinating. Looking at Jianwu, he asked, "Who sent this over?" "It was Francis, a guest elder, who asked me to send it over. He wanted me to sell it directly, as he urgently needs Yuan meteor stones." The swordsman replied. After selling the weapons forged by guest elders, there would be a cut of the profits. Immortal drunken wine, consider yourself ruthless. Yang Chen glared at Jianwu as he turned and left, intending to look for Francis. "I'll follow you to take a look." Immortal drunken wine laughed as he followed Yang Chen to the backyard of the Divine Weapon Pavilion, where Francis was located. Francis obviously didn't expect that Yang Chen would come. As the supervisor elder of the second level of the Divine Weapon Pavilion, Yang Chen's status was extraordinary, far beyond what Francis could compare to. "Francis, were you the one who inscribed the divine imprints on this sword?" Yang Chen pointed to the sword in Immortal Drunken Wine's hand as he asked. Francis's eyes flickered as he replied, "Yes, my master did." "Can you allow me to meet with your master?" Yang Chen smiled. "I'll ask my master," Francis replied, as he entered the forging hall to seek Qin Wentian's opinion. A moment later, Yang Chen saw two youths walking out, and he couldn't help but be startled. "Elder Yang Chen, this is my master Qin Wentian," Francis introduced. "Good young geniuses. Grandmaster Qin, my name is Yang Chen. How about we change locations to chat?" Yang Chen looked at Qin Wentian, and Qin Wentian nodded his head. He didn't expect that the divine imprint he inscribed would attract the attention of an elder of the Divine Weapon Pavilion. It seemed like his guess was right. The value of the divine imprint was extraordinary. The group of them arrived at a pavilion by the lake in the inner courtyard of the Divine Weapon Pavilion. The scenery here was exquisite. "Immortal Drunken Wine, why are you still here?" Yang Chen glared at Immortal Drunken Wine. "Those who can forge the sword I like are my friends. Naturally, I'm here to befriend them." Immortal Drunken Wine's breath reeked of alcohol. "Do you want a sip?" Immortal Drunken Wine raised his wine gourd as he pointed it at Qin Wentian. "This fellow is an interesting person." Qin Wentian laughed as he shook his head. "Grandmaster Qin, there are still some flaws in this divine imprint." Yang Chen glanced at Qin Wentian as he started to talk business. "It's not a flaw. It's just that I have yet to fully comprehend it. Hence, there are still some flaws in it," Qin Wentian replied. "Can you sell this divine imprint to my Divine Weapon Pavilion? You can name the price." Yang Chen finally stated his purpose. Qin Wentian stared at him as he smiled and shook his head, giving it to Yang Chen in one go. If Yang Chen allowed the weaponsmiths of the Divine Weapon Pavilion to comprehend it, his divine imprint would no longer be worth anything. "Since this is the case, are you willing to become a guest of my Divine Weapon Pavilion? I can help you apply for special privileges," Yang Chen continued. "I don't have time to stay in the Divine Weapon Pavilion." "It's the same for Francis." Qin Wentian stared at Yang Chen, his words causing Yang Chen to furrow his brows. After which Qin Wentian spoke. "If Elder Yang has nothing else to say, I'll take my leave first." "Grandmaster Qin, please wait a moment." Yang Chen blocked Qin Wentian's path as he retrieved a few Yuan meteor stones. The astral light within them was concentrated and contained a vast amount of astral energy. These were all Yuan meteor stones originating from the second heavenly layer. "Grandmaster Qin, don't be in such a hurry to reject me. Consider this as the price I have to pay for that sword." Yang Chen pointed to the sword in Immortal Drunken Wine's hand. Qin Wentian stared at the Yuan meteor stones. Although he was extremely agitated in his heart, he still endured it. The people of the Divine Weapon Pavilion were truly rich. Back then in the Qin clan, even a single Yuan meteor stone was considered a treasure. The Qin clan was simply too poor, and their resources were constantly being depleted. Fan Lu, who was standing at the side, narrowed his eyes as a brilliant light flashed in his eyes. This time around, he was going to be rich. In the future, when Grandmaster Qin creates divine weapons, can you hand them over to my Divine Weapon Pavilion for sale? My Divine Weapon Pavilion will pay half of the selling price to Grandmaster Qin. Naturally, the forging materials will also be provided by my divine weapon pavilion. In addition, if Grandmaster Qin is unwilling to become a guest elder, I can raise Francis's rank, allowing him to enjoy the resources of the divine weapon pavilion. Yang Chen's words finally caused Qin Wentian's heart to waver. For the same item, if he were to sell it to the divine weapon pavilion, the difference in rewards would be like the difference between the heavens and the earth. The divine weapon pavilion would provide a huge platform for Grandmaster Qin. Not only that, the forging materials would also be provided by the divine weapon pavilion. The divine weapon pavilion's proposal of cooperation was already a sign of their sincerity. I can't guarantee that I'll be able to forge divine weapons frequently. Qin Wentian stared at Yang Chen. The rarer something is, the greater its value. In the future, when Grandmaster Qin creates more masterpieces, I will sell them in the form of auctions. Of course, we will not dare to set a limit on how many divine weapons Grandmaster Qin needs to forge. Grandmaster Qin can do whatever he wants, Yang Chen stated. I agree. A youthful smile blossomed on Qin Wentian's face. This scene caused Yang Chen to be stunned. Since this is the case, I won't stand on ceremony with these Yuan meteor stones. A glint of light flashed in Qin Wentian's eyes, as he unceremoniously kept the Yuan meteor stones. Boss, what about mine? Fatty's eyes shone brightly as he stared at Qin Wentian, directly calling him boss. Qin Wentian cast a look of disdain at Fatty, but he still gave him a Yuan meteor stone. Fatty had a pitiful expression on his face as he stared at the other Yuan meteor stones in Qin Wentian's hands. However, he was ignored by Qin Wentian. Haha, Grandmaster Qin, in the future when you're free, come to the Divine Weapon Pavilion often. I will arrange a residence and a forging hall for Francis. If there's anything you need help with, Grandmaster Qin can look for me directly. Yang Chen stood up and laughed. These two little fellows were too interesting. No problem. Qin Wentian laughed. After which Yang Chen bade farewell. Immortal Drunken Wine stared at Qin Wentian as he laughed. Come and look for me when you feel like drinking. After Yang Chen and Immortal Drunken Wine left, Qin Wentian stared at the Yuan meteor stones in his hands as a smile broke out on his face. Now he could finally open the astral gate. Grandpa Qin, father. Qin Wentian silently called out in his heart. He hadn't forgotten that his Grandpa Qin and Father Qin were still imprisoned. Chapter 43. Very quickly, Yang Chen fulfilled his promise and made an exception to raise Francis's status as a guest elder. At the same time, Yang Chen bestowed upon Francis a large courtyard with an elegant pavilion, a pond and a pavilion, as well as a weaponsmithing hall that was even more abundant in resources. Francis was even provided with maids to take care of his daily needs. Naturally, Francis understood that all of this was because of Qin Wentian, which was why he could enjoy such treatment. At the start, Francis still had some doubts. However, when Qin Wentian taught him the second-level divine imprint, allowing him to slowly comprehend it, he finally understood why Yang Chen was so courteous. The value of the second-level divine imprint was definitely worth such treatment. Qin Wentian and Francis then worked together to forge a few more divine weapons. One of them was a set of second-level divine weapons that were specially made for Fan Le. The arm guard on the wrist, as well as the sleeves of the arm guard, were made with extremely light materials. This way, Fan Le could easily carry it on his arm, as though it was a piece of clothing. This was in consideration of the fact that Fan Le's close combat capabilities were at a disadvantage, and was specially made for him. This caused Fatty to be extremely excited, as he silently mused that if he followed a weaponsmith, he wouldn't have to worry about treasures. Even the way he addressed Qin Wentian became more intimate, calling him boss. After settling everything, Qin Wentian prepared to open the astral gate. Night, the astral light from the 9 heavenly layers cascaded downwards, illuminating the darkness. Qin Wentian's entire person was bathed in the astral light. The astral light from the heavenly hammer constellation from the 5th heavenly layer descended upon Qin Wentian, flowing into his body. At the same time, Yuan meteor stones were held in both of his hands. The surging astral energy flowed into his body through his stellar meridians, transforming into a terrifying astral whirlpool that rushed towards the location of the astral gate in his sea of consciousness. Everyone was born with an astral gate, but if one wanted to open a second astral gate, they had to first open their arterial circulation pathway, and then use the surging astral energy to open the second astral gate. This process required the support of a terrifying amount of astral energy. From this, one could see that cultivation required a huge amount of resources. Hence, some of the descendants of the rich and powerful had an advantage in their cultivation because they had more resources. Qin Wentian's mind kept shaking. The process was still very painful. Cultivation was a painful thing, but after the pain, you would be given the corresponding strength. Those who did not have great perseverance would not be able to step onto the path of the strong. Fatty had gone off to research his arm guard, while Francis was immersed in his comprehension of the divine inscriptions. Only Little Rascal was squatting by Qin Wentian's side. The night was as deep as water, and Qin Wentian's entire body was enveloped in a layer of astral light, unceasingly enduring the impact. The astral energy within the 2 yuan meteor stones in his hands was almost depleted. Finally, when the sun was about to rise, at the end of the stellar meridians, within Qin Wentian's sea of consciousness, a thunderous rumbling sound rang out as a second astral gate appeared. As the second astral gate appeared, Qin Wentian's body softly slumped onto the ground as a smile appeared on his face. Since the astral gate had been formed, condensing an astral soul wouldn't be too much of a problem for him. 2-second heavenly layer yuan meteor stones. Cultivation is truly a waste of resources. Qin Wentian mumbled with a smile on his face. Little Rascal hopped onto his chest and stuck out its tongue, appearing exceptionally adorable. Little Rascal, I'll bring you to see senior sister Luo Huan soon. Qin Wentian patted Little Rascal's head as a smile appeared on his face. The Emperor Star Academy was truly something to look forward to. How was senior sister Luo Huan? And also Orphan, he would never forget the grace he received from the 2 pursuers. Qin Wentian once again thought of that breathtaking countenance of Mo Qingqing, the #1 beauty in Chu. With regards to beauties, all men would naturally have a favorable impression of her, and Qin Wentian was no exception. However, after that cold scolding from Mo Qingqing, it caused the favorable impression he had of her to vanish into nothingness. During the day, Qin Wentian cultivated the innate technique of the dragon subduing fist. There were only 3 stances to the dragon subduing fist, but the innate technique was indeed a set of innate techniques. When one fought, one would be akin to an enraged dragon, roaring unceasingly, exuding a majestic aura. During the night, Qin Wentian started to condense an astral soul. He didn't plan to succeed in a single attempt, but rather he wanted to observe it first. His perception extended to the 9 heavenly layers. The boundless astral river was as resplendent as silver, with stars of various shapes and colors intertwining with each other, forming an incomparably resplendent picture. Right now, Qin Wentian's perception could already easily soar through the first 2 heavenly layers. When he reached the 3rd heavenly layer, he would feel a sense of pressure. The pressure from the 4th heavenly layer was even stronger, and the 5th heavenly layer was still a headache for him. He tried again and again, seeking a breakthrough, allowing himself to remain in the 5th heavenly layer for a longer period of time. After a few days, Qin Wentian's perception gradually adapted to the pressure, allowing him to endure for a longer period of time. Tonight, 9 silver needles pierced into 9 different acupoints in Qin Wentian's sea of consciousness, sealing his 6 senses, allowing him to focus without any distractions. His perception was unprecedentedly focused, and very quickly he visualized a pathway of astral light, and hypnotized himself. His perception flowed along the astral light, heading towards the heavenly layers, and slowly, he arrived at the resplendent astral river. This time around, Qin Wentian's perception didn't stop, and directly headed towards the 5th heavenly layer. The immense pressure caused him to feel suffocated, as though his perception was about to shatter. He knew that the current him was still insufficient to condense an astral soul from the 6th heavenly layer, and could only choose from the 5th heavenly layer. The Berserk Ape Constellation, condensing an astral soul from the Berserk Ape Constellation, would grant one with terrifying strength and defense. The lightning transcendent constellation was condensed from an astral soul of the lightning reverend, and had the ability to control lightning and thunder. Qin Wentian's perception rapidly floated about. He saw a constellation the size of a giant, exuding a fearsome aura of thunder and lightning. This caused him to have the urge to form an innate link with it. As long as he could form an innate link with this constellation, the astral energy in his body would be imbued with the tyrannical aura of thunder and lightning, tempering his body with the power of thunder and lightning. The higher the level of the astral river, not only would the astral souls contain greater amounts of energy, there would also be some extraordinary astral souls. Suppressing the urge to form a connection with the lightning seigneur's constellation, Qin Wentian continued his search. His perception detected a strange constellation. This constellation seemed to be the silhouette of a person in slumber. With just a single glance, before Qin Wentian's perception could even connect to it, he felt a sense of drowsiness. After which, his perception was no longer under his control, as though he had fallen into a deep slumber. Sleeping astral soul. An idea appeared in Qin Wentian's mind. After which, his perception also entered a dreamlike state, completely involuntarily. In his dreams, his perception drifted towards the dreamlike constellation. In his dreams, he condensed his dreamlike astral soul, and in his dreams, he began to absorb the astral energy from the dreamlike constellation. This was an extremely long dream, or rather, it wasn't a dream. To Qin Wentian, this was reality. In his dreams, he began to use Yuan meteor stones to communicate with the tiny astral being in his sea of consciousness. The tiny astral being greedily absorbed the astral energy, as though there was no end to it. Beside the tiny astral being, there were 2 astral gates, each of which was occupied by an astral soul. Finally, Qin Wentian's perception was sucked into the tiny astral being. This time around, Qin Wentian didn't absorb the astral being's memories. Instead, he saw a magnificent scene. He saw an incomparably majestic sect. This sect seemed to be situated on top of a sacred mountain, towering into the skies, exuding a majestic aura, as though it wanted to contend against the heavens and earth. Qin Heavenly Divine Sect. In the airspace above the majestic sect, 4 gigantic words were inscribed on 4 stone pillars that pierced through the clouds. The words were filled with a tyrannical aura, and one could see how powerful the person who inscribed these words was. In front of this majestic sect, a group of experts appeared, standing proudly in the air. Resplendent halos radiated from their bodies, and their astral souls were something he had never seen before. In fact, their astral souls had already transformed into terrifying astral soul constellations, as though the entire world was their astral soul constellations. The impact of this scene to Qin Wentian was immense. He could feel how tiny and inconsequential he was. However, this group of terrifying experts was currently surrounding a middle-aged man. This middle-aged man's black hair danced wildly in the wind, his eyes gleaming with high spirits. Facing these experts, he exuded the aura of a monarch descending from the heavens. His entire body was enveloped by a resplendent light, as though he was the ruler of this world. Abruptly, the entire world transformed into a world of constellations. The middle-aged man, who was enveloped by the constellations, radiated boundless divine light. His palms trembled in the air, and with a single palm strike, the heavens and earth seemed to open up. The constellations in the sky crumbled apart as the middle-aged man punched out once more, containing a supreme might within. After which, Qin Wentian saw that the experts surrounding the middle-aged man all had looks of terror on their faces as their bodies directly crumbled apart, transforming into dust. How terrifying! That palm strike was akin to the might of the heavens, capable of destroying the constellations in the sky and wiping away all life. Qin Wentian couldn't sense how terrifying that aura was. He could only use his consciousness to observe, but even so, he could still see the chaotic currents of chaos destroying everything. But at this moment, an intense surge of chaotic currents of consciousness appeared, causing the scene before him to twist and distort before vanishing. Qin Wentian only felt his consciousness returning to the tiny astral being's world as memory fragments frenziedly flowed into his mind. After which, everything in front of him turned blurry as Qin Wentian's consciousness was ejected from the tiny astral being. Who? Qin Wentian breathed heavily. When he opened his eyes, the first thing he saw was the wretched countenance of Fatty. What are you doing? Qin Wentian's body trembled. Fatty grinned at him before moving his head away from Qin Wentian. Only now did Qin Wentian discover that he was still lying on the ground. Qin Wentian, you can really sleep. You slept for 3 whole days. Fatty inclined his head and stared at the sky as he spoke in a depressed tone. What made him even more depressed was that when Qin Wentian was sleeping, there were 9 silver needles inserted into his head. At the same time, the astral light from the 9 heavenly layers cascaded downwards. Not only that, even though he was beside Qin Wentian, he also felt like sleeping. Little rascal had already fallen asleep beside Qin Wentian. Chapter 44. Qin Wentian was dumbfounded. This sleep lasted for 3 days? Astral soul. Qin Wentian closed his eyes, and in his sea of consciousness, 2 astral gates opened up. The heavenly hammer astral soul and great dream astral soul sat within the astral gates, and beside them was the dim tiny astral being. Memories, there really are new memories. My head hurts. Qin Wentian shook his head, as more and more memories appeared in his sea of consciousness, as he slowly digested them. Heavenly Dipper Realm Cultivation Art, Dreamcast Art. This art can support me all the way to the Heavenly Dipper Realm. The Dreamcast art can be divided into 3 levels: Shallow Dream State, Immersed Dream State, and Forgotten Dream State. The Shallow Dream State is the slowest, and allows one to enter a simple state of slumber for cultivation. The Immersed Dream State allows one to enter a deep sleep state for cultivation, increasing the speed of cultivation. One can even create dreams, allowing others to enter the dreamscape. The Forgotten Dream State allows one to create dreams, allowing one to live in the dreamscape. One can even control life and death in the dreamscape. Qin Wentian gradually read through these memories, as his heart trembled. When he condensed his first astral soul, he was bestowed with the Tempered Thousand Hammer Refinement Art, which was extremely suitable for cultivation in the body refinement realm. Now that he had condensed his second astral soul, the Dreamcast art appeared in his memories. Similarly, this cultivation art was completely compatible with his astral soul, as though the tiny astral being was purposefully transmitting these memories to him. And this time around, not only were there the memories of the Dreamcast art, there was also another vast set of memories, the Spirit Refinement Method. The Spirit Refinement Method was also a set of cultivation arts, but it wasn't a cultivation art used to raise one's cultivation level, but rather, it was an extremely fearsome cultivation art used to condense astral energy. According to the information in the vast set of memories, the first level of the Spirit Refinement Method required one to use first-level divine imprints to condense astral energy, transforming it into divine yuan energy. Using divine imprints to condense astral energy, Qin Wentian would never have dared to imagine that such a fearsome cultivation art existed. Divine imprints were considered supreme treasures in the world of weaponsmiths. A first-level divine imprint could be used to forge divine weapons. For example, a first-level flying sword divine imprint could be inscribed onto a weapon, granting it an aura of sharpness and amplifying its strength. For example, if the astral energy in one's body was condensed from first-level divine imprints, then when the boundless true yuan was released at the same time, it would be equivalent to many first-level divine imprints exploding at the same time. If he were to use the power of his innate abilities to release these divine inscriptions, how terrifying would that be? Just imagining it made one's blood boil. However, the Spirit Refinement Method was extremely difficult to cultivate. If one wanted to condense astral energy into divine imprints, not only would one need to expend a vast amount of astral energy, one would also need to have a high level of comprehension towards divine imprints. Not only that, this method of condensing divine energy would definitely be extremely time-consuming. Another point was that when stellar martial cultivators cultivated, they would need to expend their true yuan energy in combat. This meant that the divine yuan energy that they had spent a long time to condense would be depleted in the event of a battle. One could imagine, if one wanted to cultivate the Spirit Refinement Method, they would need a huge amount of yuan meteor stones as well as a lot of time to support themselves. Only then would they be able to persist until they could condense the first level of divine yuan energy in an instant. Phew. Qin Wentian slowly digested these memories and took a deep breath. Difficult. This spirit refinement method was too difficult. The Dreamcast art could increase one's cultivation speed, but the spirit refinement method could slow down one's cultivation speed to its slowest. That arrogant middle-aged man from the Qin Heavenly Divine sect. He must have cultivated the spirit refinement method. Qin Wentian silently mused as he recalled the shocking scene in the video. Also, why would the Qin Heavenly Divine sect appear in the tiny astral being? What relationship did that middle-aged man have with him? Old fogey, what secret did you leave behind? Qin Wentian really wanted to ask Uncle Black about it. Sadly, after the incident at the Qin residence, Sister Yao said that Uncle Black had disappeared. Fan Le waved his hand in front of Qin Wentian's eyes, causing Qin Wentian to glare at him. Are you sick? Fatty asked with a straight face. This guy couldn't have slept so much that he became stupid, right? Qin Wentian's brows twitched as a smile appeared on his face. Momentarily, Fatty shivered as he retreated 2 steps back. Boss, I'm just worried that something might have happened to you. I don't mean anything else. Evidently, Fatty still had a lingering fear in his heart from the beating he received previously. How about we return to the Emperor Star Academy tomorrow? Qin Wentian asked Fatty. Fatty's eyes brightened as a wretched smile appeared on his face. He winked at Qin Wentian, his meaning clear. Was he finally going to the Emperor Star Academy? He was filled with anticipation. Qin Wentian had already broken through to the arterial circulation realm. With his berserk astral soul, it shouldn't be a problem for him to deal with Orphan. As he thought of this, a cold glint of light flashed in Fatty's eyes. Master. At this moment, Francis walked over with a smile on his face. What's the matter? Qin Wentian asked Francis. Good news. Today, the Divine Weapon Pavilion auctioned off a divine weapon forged by Master. Because of the publicity, it attracted many people from the royal capital. Not only that, there were some powerful characters who tried to probe the divine weapon, and discovered that not only did the divine weapon possess an amplification effect, it could also store true yuan within a short period of time. Many people participated in the auction. Can you guess how much this second-level divine weapon was sold for? Francis was extremely excited. He was indeed very happy. It seemed like he didn't follow the wrong person. If he continued to stay in the Star River Association, unless he was angered by Murin, he wouldn't be able to do anything for the rest of his life. What's the price? Qin Wentian was extremely curious. 15 second-level yuan meteor stones. Francis laughed. For an ordinary second-level divine weapon, 1 yuan meteor stone is sufficient. Not only that, this is the first auction and it has already caused such a huge commotion. After this auction, it will definitely attract even more people, including some weaponsmiths who wish to research divine imprints. Qin Wentian laughed. If he was the one selling the divine weapons, it would definitely not have such an effect. In the future, when his comprehension towards divine imprints deepened, he would be able to inscribe even higher quality divine weapons, and the yuan meteor stones he obtained would be sufficient to support him in his cultivation of the spiritual refinement method. Master, these are the yuan meteor stones. The divine weapon pavilion gave me 8 of them. Francis smiled as he passed the yuan meteor stones to Qin Wentian. Keep these 2 for yourself. In the future when I'm free, I will come here again to forge divine weapons. You should also focus on comprehending the divine imprints, and don't neglect your cultivation. Qin Wentian left 2 yuan meteor stones for Francis. Many thanks, Master. You can go now. Qin Wentian dismissed Francis as he continued his cultivation of the dragon-subduing fist, and at the same time, slowly comprehending the spiritual refinement method as well as the Dreamcast art. The spiritual refinement method wasn't something that could be completed in a single day. However, Qin Wentian was able to enter the first level of the Dreamcast art, the shallow dreamscape. That night, he cultivated in his sleep. On top of 2 constellations in the 5th heavenly layer, the astral light from the constellations cascaded down onto the sleeping Qin Wentian. Cultivating in his sleep caused Fatty to be dumbfounded. One could really cultivate in their sleep? Fatty was so envious. Early the next morning, Qin Wentian and Fan Le bade farewell to Francis, borrowed 2 horses, and after asking for directions, they set off towards the Emperor Star Academy. Upon arriving at the Emperor Star Academy, Qin Wentian discovered that there were many people like them, who were all heading towards the entrance of the Emperor Star Academy. Why is it so lively? Qin Wentian curiously asked. Could it be because they knew that I would return? Fan Le grinned. Qin Wentian rolled his eyes. He was still thinking about how to enter the Emperor Star Academy and contact senior sister Luo Huan to obtain the Emperor Star Jade Medallion. Who would have thought that the Emperor Star Academy would open its doors today? Which academy are you guys from? A young lady with braids smiled at Qin Wentian as she asked. Emperor Star Academy. What about you? Qin Wentian replied. Students from the Emperor Star Academy, you're really awesome. I'm currently cultivating in the Scarlet Flame Martial Palace. Today is the last day of the ranking battle, and since the Emperor Star Academy didn't forbid the other academies from participating in the Emperor Star Academy's ranking battle, I wanted to personally witness the strength of the outstanding students from the Emperor Star Academy to motivate myself. I should still be able to make it in time for the battles. The young lady smiled as she continued. It's rare for me to come here, so I have to hurry up and take a look. I'll take my leave first. After which, the young lady quickened her steps as she waved her hands at the 2 of them. Qin Wentian and Fan Lu exchanged glances as smiles broke out on their faces. The 2 of them quickly followed the crowd, and not long after, they arrived at the central training grounds of the Emperor Star Academy. Many people were gathered together, spectating the battles taking place on the training grounds. Murongfeng, the undisputed top ranker of this batch of students from the Emperor Star Academy. His talent is comparable to the 10 prodigies of the royal capital, and he's already at the 4th level of the arterial circulation realm at the age of 16. Not only that, he also condensed 2 astral souls. His potential is extremely high. On the platform, a silhouette of a youthful youth appeared. After defeating his opponent with a single strike, he appeared incomparably calm. To him, this was merely a formality. The #1 academy in the Chu country is the cradle of geniuses. Every year, there would be geniuses with great potential. Other than Murongfeng, Lin Xiao and Du Hao are both at the 3rd level of the arterial circulation realm. Not only that, there are also 3 at the 2nd level of the arterial circulation realm. This batch of students is much stronger compared to the previous batch. The crowd discussed, causing Qin Wentian to silently muse that the Emperor Star Academy was indeed a place of many hidden dragons and crouching tigers. TSK, it seems like I, the #1 genius, still have to work hard to prove myself. Fan Le laughed in a low voice as he glanced at Qin Wentian beside him. Don't worry, your first astral soul was condensed from an astral soul from the 3rd heavenly layer. You should be the same as this genius, not cultivating the yuan qi of heaven and earth. You only started cultivating after you awakened your astral soul. That's why you started so late. Orphan went up. Qin Wentian didn't bother with Fan Li's words. His eyes flickered with a cold light as he stared at the silhouette of Orphan. He almost killed us, right? Fan Li narrowed his eyes as he asked. Yes. Qin Wentian nodded his head. Do something big? Fan Li's eyes narrowed into slits. What do you want to do? Qin Wentian asked. Do it to death. Fan Li grinned. Right. Qin Wentian nodded his head. The 2 of them exchanged glances as radiant smiles appeared on their faces. Chapter 45. Orphan's strength was definitely ranked within the top 10 in this batch of students. For this batch of students, Murongfeng was at the 4th level of arterial circulation, Lin Xiao and Du Hao were at the 3rd level, and the remaining 3 were at the 2nd level. One of them was Orphan. For this round, Orphan's opponent was at the 1st level of arterial circulation. Due to the disparity in their strength, Orphan's frenzied serpent spear technique quickly defeated his opponent. Upon witnessing this scene, Janus had a faint smile on his face as he stated, Orphan's spear technique has the agility of a serpent, as well as the tyranny of a python. He has already comprehended the essence of this innate technique. After this battle, he will definitely be ranked within the top 10. Right, Orphan didn't disappoint me. Orkhan, who was at the side, indifferently nodded his head. Everything was within his expectations. On the other side, Mustang's countenance was extremely unsightly to behold. This was because they had different standpoints. In the Emperor Star Academy, he and Janice had always been in opposition to each other. Their students were the same as well, and for every batch of new students, he, Janice, and a few other teachers would choose their students. More accurately speaking, it was the students who chose their teachers. Orphan was obviously a student under Janice's faction, and he, Mustang, originally had high hopes for Qin Wentian. But now, Qin Wentian had already been missing for more than 10 days. No matter how I look at this Orphan, I still feel uncomfortable. Junior brother Qin is more honest and more pleasing to the eye. Luo Huan's beautiful eyes stared at the complacent Orphan on the platform, her countenance somewhat unsightly. Orphan, who was on the platform, turned and prepared to leave. However, at this moment, a voice abruptly rang out. Powerful, truly powerful. A teasing voice rang out, and the spectators saw a fat silhouette walking up the platform. Upon seeing this fatty, Orphan's eyes instantly narrowed, as a cold light flickered within. How was this possible? He was actually still alive. Why are you here? Orphan spat out in a low voice. After stepping into the illusionary city, he was actually able to walk out? Why wouldn't I appear? Fan Le laughed as he looked at Orphan. Momentarily, Orphan seemed to have realized something, and immediately shut his mouth, as though he didn't know who Fan Le was. Long time no see. Another voice drifted over, and Orphan saw a familiar silhouette, Qin Wentian. Junior brother Qin. Mountain, who was in the spectator stands, saw Qin Wentian standing up with a simple and honest smile on his face. Luo Huan's beautiful eyes also flashed with a strange light as she laughed in a low voice. I knew you wouldn't die so easily. A white silhouette flickered and instantly leapt into Luo Huan's embrace. Under the gazes of countless envious gazes, Little Rascal's body lay on top of Luo Huan's softness, causing countless people to be filled with envy. When Mustang saw Qin Wentian, he heaved a sigh of relief in his heart. This fellow actually dared to directly walk up to the arena. The spectators all had puzzled expressions on their faces when they saw Qin Wentian and Fan Le. Who were these two who had suddenly appeared? Qin Wentian and Fan Le slowly walked towards Orphan. Orphan retreated repeatedly, as though he was extremely afraid of the two of them. After all, he had personally witnessed what Fan Le and Qin Wentian had done in the dark forest. Mu Yi had been pierced to death by an arrow in the air. Impudent! Who are you? How dare you cause trouble here? Janice abruptly shouted, his gaze sweeping over to Qin Wentian and Fan Le. At this moment, it was as though he didn't know Qin Wentian at all. A student from the Emperor Star Academy, Qin Wentian. A student from the Emperor Star Academy, Fan Le. Is that so? Why did you only appear today? Janice sneered. Because of some matters, I was delayed. That's why I'm a little late. Fan Le smiled. Do you think we can delay just because you say so? This is the Emperor Star Academy, not a place for you to behave atrociously. Scram. Janice coldly snorted, as a cold glint of light flickered in his eyes. Qin Wentian and Fan Le turned their gazes onto Janice, laughing coldly in their hearts. Elder Janice, I'd like to ask if I can become an official student of the 9 great academies if I pass the initial test, and survive the training grounds of the Dark Forest? Fan Le smiled as he asked Janice. Yes. Janice had no way to refute. This was something that everyone knew. When I participated in the initial test, it was Elder Janice who personally supervised me. There were also many witnesses who testified that I entered the training grounds of the Dark Forest. Now that I've survived, Elder Janice shouldn't doubt my identity as an official student of the Emperor Star Academy, right? Fan Le laughed. Even if that's the case, so what? Janice coldly snorted. Today my Emperor Star Academy. Stop. Before Janice could finish his sentence, he was interrupted by Fan Le. Fatty slowly inclined his head, staring at Janice as he grinned. Since that's the case, why are you still farting? As the sound of Fan Le's voice faded, the entire space abruptly turned silent. The gazes of everyone were fixated on Fan Le. The arrogant fatty lifted his head, as he smiled radiantly at Janice. Fatty's temper wasn't very good. Although he was always smiling, he was almost killed by someone in the dark forest. What was even more despicable was that Orkan, in front of everyone, had shot him with a spear. That spear strike had caused Fatty to lose face. Astral light flashed as an astral bow appeared in Fatty's hands. In an instant he pierced through the air, shooting towards the void. The crowd inclined their heads as they stared at the arrow shooting towards the sky, with expressions of bewilderment on their faces. However, very quickly, they discovered that the arrow was descending downwards, aiming directly at Orphan's back. It was as though Orphan's path of retreat had been sealed. At the instant Fatty took out the arrow, Qin Wentian's silhouette flickered. Boom! The entire training grounds trembled. Qin Wentian's silhouette was akin to a tyrannical hurricane as he lunged towards Orphan. The rumbling sounds of the earth trembling unceasingly rang out, as though there was a rhythm to it. This sudden scene caused the spectators to have no time to react. It was too sudden. Fan Le had just finished scolding Janice, and right after that, Qin Wentian and Fan Le attacked Orphan in front of everyone. In the midst of the Emperor Star Academy's ranking battle, Orphan's countenance instantly turned unsightly to behold. He wanted to retreat, but his path of retreat was completely sealed off by the arrow. He understood how profound Fan Le's archery was. Since Fan Le wanted to seal off his path of retreat, there was no need for him to think about retreating. He could only advance forward. As long as he defeated Qin Wentian, Janice and Orkan would definitely not allow Qin Wentian and Fan Le to act so atrociously. Qin Wentian and Fan Le only needed this instant to deal with him. As he thought of this, Orphan turned and dashed towards Qin Wentian, not retreating but advancing instead. The frenzied serpent spear abruptly pierced out, resembling an incomparably savage python, wanting to pierce through Qin Wentian's body. Qin Wentian, who was madly dashing towards Orphan, borrowed the momentum of the dragon's subduing fists and punched out. The tyrannical might of the dragon's subduing fists was fully displayed at this moment. An azure dragon howled in rage as it lunged towards Orphan's frenzied serpent spear technique. Pung pung. The astral spear in Orphan's hands crumbled inch by inch. Feeling the tyrannical might of the dragon's roar, Orphan's countenance instantly paled. It was as though his face was about to be torn apart by the tyrannical force of the dragon's roar. Arterial circulation realm. Orphan's heart trembled. The aura radiating from Qin Wentian indicated that he was at the arterial circulation realm. Not only that, how could his attack be so tyrannical? His body retreated as he condensed an astral shield. Roar. A deafening roar reverberated through the air. The gazes of the spectators were fixated on the arena. They only saw the sharp claws of an azure dragon appearing, directly shattering the astral shield into smithereens. Following which, the claws abruptly grabbed onto Orphan's neck. In the next instant, they saw Qin Wentian's palms clasping onto Orphan's neck, lifting him up into the air. Impudent! Release him! Enraged shouts rang out as Orkan and the other two youths instantly appeared at the edge of the arena. A wild and unrestrained aura gushed forth as they lunged towards Qin Wentian. This was especially so for Orkan. The long spear in his hands was pointed towards Qin Wentian, as killing intent gushed forth from him. You're courting death. Orkan coldly stared at Qin Wentian, as though he was looking at a dead man. Qin Wentian hated this kind of gaze. Just like back then in the dark forest, this gaze made him feel extremely uncomfortable. Hence, with a violent jerk of his arm, Orphan's body was directly smashed into the ground. The sound of bones shattering rang out, accompanied by a miserable shriek. Orkan's countenance instantly turned ashen. Qin Wentian had actually abused his younger brother in front of him. This was no longer something that could be described with the word face-slapping. He had never been slapped in such a manner before. His face was burning hot, and his killing intent surged forth violently, wanting to dismember Qin Wentian into 1,000 pieces. Even Mustang and the rest were stunned by this sudden scene. Only after a while did they regain their senses. Many thoughts flashed through Mustang's mind, as a brilliant light flickered in his eyes. This fellow is indeed an honest man. If he isn't honest, he's not human. Luo Huan's beautiful eyes flashed with a seductive smile. Qin Wentian usually appeared harmless, but if he was angered, he would explode just like now. However, she liked it. Chapter 46. The teachers of the Emperor Star Academy were all shaken. They stood up, their countenances extremely unsightly as they stared at the scene on the stage. Today was the last day of the ranking battle, and there were many students from the outer academy who came to spectate. But today on the stage, there were actually 2 students who wanted to kill Orphan. In the history of the Emperor Star Academy, such a brazen act had never happened before. As expected of students from the Emperor Star Academy, not a single one of them would know their place. Some of the teachers from the outer academy had smiles on their faces as they witnessed this scene. Geniuses were always arrogant, especially when a group of geniuses were gathered in the same place. It was inevitable that they would clash with each other. The Emperor Star Academy was known as the cradle of geniuses in the Chu country. Many of the students there were arrogant and untamed, and were the most difficult to tame. Hence, the teachers of the Emperor Star Academy were all extremely powerful. On the spectator stands, there were also many old students like Luo Huan and Orkan. Their lips curled into a faint smile as they silently mused. Interesting, the Emperor Star Academy has another troublemaker. And this time around, there were 2 of them. I wonder if their strength is as great as their guts. Janice walked down the stage step by step, staring at Qin Wentian as he coldly stated. In the history of the Emperor Star Academy, there has never been such an impudent student. Now there is. Qin Wentian stared at Janice as he coldly replied. There has to be someone who can lead the way. Fan Le grinned. At this moment he had also walked to the side of Qin Wentian. Staring at Orphan's enraged eyes, Fatty accidentally placed his foot on Orphan's palm and twisted it, causing Orphan to howl in agony. The pain from his palm caused him to grit his teeth in anger. Fatty lowered his head, looking at Orphan apologetically as he smiled. Sorry, I didn't see it. Although this was what he said, the force of Fatty's foot increased, causing Orphan's screams to become even more shrill. The spectators all rolled their eyes. This fellow was so shameless. Do you see it now? Killing intent gushed forth from Orkan's body as he slowly approached Orphan. Fatty stared at Orkan as he increased the force of his foot, causing tears to flow from Orphan's eyes. I saw it, but I didn't move my eyes away. Fatty grinned at Orkan. He would never forget the look of contempt in Orkan's eyes that day. Fatty was very vengeful. Stop! Qin Wentian coldly spat out. In his hands, the astral heavenly hammer gleamed with a resplendent light as it smashed down towards Orphan's head. As long as this hammer smashed down, Orphan would instantly lose his life. Janice, Orkan, and the rest stopped in their tracks. Since they had met 2 lunatics, even if they were infuriated, they had no choice but to endure. What do you want? Janice stared at the 2 of them as he asked. This was the first time he felt so aggrieved in front of these 2 students. As long as he could rescue Orphan, he would definitely make sure that Qin Wentian and Fan Le would die a horrible death. You'll have to ask my boss about that. I'm very low-key. Fatty smiled and threw the question to Qin Wentian. The crowd rolled their eyes when they heard what he said. Fatty was really very low-key. Fan Le was extremely angry about what happened in the dark forest. Hence he didn't hold back and chose to seek revenge. However, in his heart, Fan Le was very clear that the source of this matter was none other than Qin Wentian. He and Qin Wentian stood shoulder to shoulder on the stage, facing the storm together. However, he had also handed the final decision to Qin Wentian. Fatty was very low-key, but he wasn't cowardly at all. Since he was standing here, it meant that no matter what decision Qin Wentian made, he would have to bear the consequences together with Qin Wentian. Shameless Fatty, but he's actually very loyal. How intelligent was Luo Huan? Her beautiful eyes shone with a brilliant light. She discovered that although she had just met this Fatty, she also liked this low-key and shameless Fatty the same way she liked Qin Wentian. Fatty, if we spare Orphan, do you think Orkan will apologize to us and let us go? Qin Wentian laughed as he gazed at Fan Le. He won't. Fan Le shook his head. Back in the dark forest, He already wanted our lives. Now, I'm afraid he wants us even more. Even if we kneel down and beg for mercy, the result would still be the same. Seems like it. Qin Wentian mumbled, his words causing the countenances of Janice and Orkhan to turn even more unsightly. From their conversation, it seemed as though they had completely disregarded them and had no intentions of letting Orphan off. Qin Wentian shifted his gaze towards Mustang, who was also walking up the stage. Smiling, he asked, "Teacher Mustang, I have a few questions I'd like to consult you on." "Go ahead," Mustang replied. "If you have no grudges with someone, but someone wants to kill you, and in addition, almost succeeded several times, what would you do if that person landed in your hands?" Qin Wentian asked. "I'd kill him," Mustang replied. "His clan is extremely powerful." Qin Wentian asked again. "I won't kill him. His clan is still extremely powerful," Mustang replied. "Mustang!" Janice roared in rage. Who were these people? How could the crowd not understand the meaning behind their conversation? Mustang was instigating Qin Wentian. At this moment, the crowd understood that Orphan definitely wanted to kill Qin Wentian and Fan Le. Hence, they didn't care about the consequences, directly walking up the stage and trampling Orphan beneath their feet. They even dared to challenge the prestige of the Emperor Star Academy. Before this, when Qin Wentian and Fan Le were discussing how to deal with Orphan, both of them came to an agreement. Regardless of whether they killed Orphan or not, the result would be the same. Hence, the conclusion they came to was, kill. Now, the meaning behind the conversation between Qin Wentian and Mustang was even more thought-provoking. Qin Wentian was asking for Mustang's opinion. Naturally, he used a veiled tone to ask for Mustang's opinion, but everyone could hear it clearly. Regardless of whether they killed Orphan or not, the power of the O clan was there for all to see. They would definitely deal with Qin Wentian. There was no doubt about this. Hence, whether they killed Orphan or not, to Qin Wentian, there was no difference. Mustang, the ironclad rule of the Emperor Star Academy forbids students from engaging in life and death battles within the academy grounds. You should know the consequences of violating this rule. Janice's tone was filled with an intense coldness. Mustang actually dared to express his stance in public, hinting at Qin Wentian. Qin Wentian. Mustang stared at Qin Wentian as he continued. In the history of the Emperor Star Academy, there have been 3 cases where students killed others within the academy grounds. One of them, the student who killed the other was executed on the spot. Another time, the student who killed the other was imprisoned in a forbidden area for a total of 50 years. After which, he swore that he would never step out of the Emperor Star Academy, and that he was willing to take up a position within the academy. Mustang's words caused the countenances of the crowd to turn solemn. The ironclad rule of the Emperor Star Academy was simply too strict. Within the academy grounds, no one was allowed to kill anyone. If not, the consequences would be extremely severe. Because of the existence of the ironclad rule, nobody dared to act recklessly within the academy grounds. What about the other time? Qin Wentian stared at Mustang as he asked. If that was really a path to death, then what was the meaning of the conversation he had with Mustang earlier? The other time, the student who killed the other is currently the headmaster of the Emperor Star Academy. Mustang's calm voice caused the atmosphere to abruptly turn silent. They all knew how strict the ironclad rule of the Emperor Star Academy was, especially when it came to killing fellow students within the academy grounds. However, very few people knew of this history. The current headmaster of the Emperor Star Academy was one of the students who had violated the ironclad rule. Qin Wentian stared into Mustang's eyes. He didn't ask why, because he already understood. 3 students, 3 completely different fates. One died, one worked for the Emperor Star Academy, and one became the headmaster of the Emperor Star Academy. 3 different fates, because the value of the 3 of them to the Emperor Star Academy was completely different. The students of the Emperor Star Academy were all thorns. They came from all over the Emperor Star Academy, and all of them had extraordinary talent. The Emperor Star Academy had never cared about how thorny you were, or how arrogant you were. What they cared about was whether you had the capital to be thorny, and whether you had the capital to be arrogant. Geniuses were arrogant, self-confidence and arrogance. Mediocre people were arrogant, conceited and foolish. In this world, other than blood relatives, no one owed anyone anything. If you wanted others to do something for you, you had to first prove what you could give to them. Qin Wentian had already understood this logic when he was at the Star River Association in the Sky Harmony City. He didn't agree to Murin's conditions, which was why Murin chose to betray him in exchange for the benefits of the Yi clan. This was reality. It was extremely naked. And now he, Qin Wentian, was once again faced with a choice. Regardless of whether he killed Orphan or not, the O clan and Orkan would still want Qin Wentian dead. Hence, there was no need to consider them. The only thing Qin Wentian needed to consider was the attitude of the Emperor Star Academy. Qin Wentian inclined his head as he stared at Orkan. A radiant smile could be seen on his face, as though there was already an answer in his clear eyes. In the Sky Harmony City, he and the Qin clan were forced into such a miserable state by the Yi clan. In the royal capital of Chu, Janus made things difficult for him, and Orphan wanted to kill him. In front of him, there was the Yi clan, the O clan, and even the most terrifying power in Chu, the royal clan. This time around, if he chose to endure and let Orphan off, the Yi clan and the O clan would only scorn him for his cowardice. In the royal capital of Chu, the answer was very simple. Hence to him, the answer was actually very simple. Chapter 47. The gazes of countless people landed on Qin Wentian. What decision would he make? B. The long spear in Orkan's hands shimmered with a terrifying light, as waves of killing intent gushed forth unabashedly. Looking at the smile on Qin Wentian's face, Orkan had a bad premonition. Qin Wentian really dared to make a move. Release him. Orkan's voice was filled with a terrifying coldness. Looking at that cold countenance, Qin Wentian was exceptionally calm. Even at this moment, you still haven't put down that arrogance of yours. Just like before, you stare at me with that gaze. Most probably you don't care about his death at all. As he spoke, Qin Wentian's fist shimmered with a brilliant light. At this moment, the hearts of the spectators all tensed up. If you make a move, I can guarantee that you won't become the third. Only the first will be your final resting place. Janus stared at Qin Wentian. The third person had become the headmaster of the Emperor Star Academy, while the first person had been killed by the Emperor Star Academy. If I'm only the first, then in this vast royal capital, if I don't kill him, there will be no place for me to live. The smile on Qin Wentian's face remained unchanged. The first person meant that he didn't have much value to the Emperor Star Academy. If that was the case, how could he establish a foothold in the royal capital? Lowering his head, Qin Wentian stared at Orphan. Orphan stared back at him, and when he saw the look in Qin Wentian's eyes, Orphan felt true fear. Your life is in my hands, yet no one is willing to lower their heads for you. The person you should hate isn't me. Qin Wentian calmly stated, causing Orphan's body to tremble. Qin Wentian's words were akin to an announcement of his death. That's right, he had tried to take Qin Wentian's life several times, and Qin Wentian's desire to kill him was within his expectations. However, his elder brother, as well as Janus, none of them had lowered their heads to plead for him. This caused him to feel a wave of sorrow. He had once worshipped the arrogance of his elder brother. But at this moment, when this arrogance was used on Qin Wentian, it actually caused him, Orphan, to lose his life. Qin Wentian raised his arm and punched out with the dragon's subduing fists. The roar of a dragon rang out as an azure dragon lunged towards Orphan's head. I hate it. Orphan let out an enraged roar of despair. After which, a thunderous boom rang out as his body exploded into pieces. Only that roar of unwillingness remained, reverberating through the air for a long time. The entire space became even quieter, so much so that one could hear a pin drop. Qin Wentian became the fourth person in the history of the Emperor Star Academy. The fourth person who dared to kill another student within the academy grounds. Mustang, Luo Huan, and the rest felt their hearts pounding. Killed, Qin Wentian had killed Orphan on the spot. The spectators below also drew in a deep breath. The Emperor Star Academy had produced two madmen. Orkan's eyes flashed with an extreme coldness. He advanced towards Qin Wentian, as killing intent gushed forth from his body. Orkan! Janus called out, causing Orkan to halt his steps. He wanted nothing more than to pierce through Qin Wentian's head with his spear. However, Qin Wentian had already violated the greatest taboo of the Emperor Star Academy. Orkan couldn't become the fifth person to do so. If not, although he had avenged Orphan, his own life would be in an extremely difficult position. For those who violated the ironclad rules of the Emperor Star Academy, the Academy would never look at their background. Killing a fellow student in the ranking battle of the Emperor Star Academy? You are the first person who dared to challenge the prestige of the Emperor Star Academy. Janus stared at Qin Wentian, as though he was looking at a dead man. I, Janus, in the name of an elder of the Emperor Star Academy, request permission from the disciplinary committee to kill Qin Wentian on the spot, in order to avenge his brother Orphan. Janus's voice was cold. At this moment, silhouettes after silhouettes leapt onto the training grounds. These people were all disciples of the disciplinary committee, and as they stepped onto the training grounds, they instantly dashed towards Qin Wentian. Behind the crowd, a middle-aged man slowly walked up. Thousand Hands, the disciplinary elder of the disciplinary committee. He had the authority to make decisions within the Emperor Star Academy. His gaze was emotionless as he glanced at Qin Wentian. During the training grounds of the Dark Forest, Orphan wanted to kill Qin Wentian several times. If not, the two of them wouldn't have come to the academy for revenge. I, Mustang, request for the disciplinary elder to be lenient with this punishment. As for Qin Wentian, I will personally accept him as my disciple. Mustang stepped forward, similarly stepping onto the training grounds. Janus wanted Qin Wentian to die, while Mustang wanted to protect Qin Wentian. Elder Thousand Hands, Mustang incited Qin Wentian to kill a fellow student, and now, he even dared to shield a murderer. I, Janus, request the disciplinary committee to convict Mustang of this crime. Janus took a step forward, opposing with equal harshness. The seniors of the Emperor Star Academy all knew that Janus and Mustang had different standpoints, and were already like fire and water. Hence, they weren't surprised by the scene before them. But how would the disciplinary committee handle this? Qin Wentian, you killed a fellow student during the ranking battle. Do you admit to this crime? Thousand Hands didn't bother with Janus and Mustang, only staring at Qin Wentian as he coldly asked. The members of the disciplinary committee had already surrounded Qin Wentian. Upon witnessing this scene, the hearts of the spectators trembled. It seemed like the disciplinary committee would not spare Qin Wentian. The matter of Orphan attempting to assassinate me in the Dark Forest. Will the disciplinary committee pursue this matter? Qin Wentian stared at Thousand Hands as he asked. Nope. Thousand Hands straightforwardly replied. The disciplinary committee will not pursue this matter. Of course I want to avenge myself. What crime is there in that? Qin Wentian's voice was domineering. This fellow, Mountain, who was standing at the back, was dumbfounded. This Qin Wentian, how could he dare to talk back to the members of the disciplinary committee? I, Janus, once again request the disciplinary committee to allow Orkan to kill this brat personally, in order to avenge his brother. Janus spoke once more. Thousand Hands was silent for a moment, before he waved his hands. Momentarily, the members of the disciplinary committee stepped aside, leaving space for Orkan and Qin Wentian. Elder Thousand Hands, if the disciplinary committee agrees to Janus's request, I'm afraid that I will have to interfere. Mustang was extremely domineering as he took a step forward. Mustang, you dare to interfere with the disciplinary committee? Janus coldly laughed as he walked towards Mustang. Orkan, on the other hand, emitted a murderous aura as he advanced towards Qin Wentian. Not only that, the disciples of Janus and Mustang, with Qin Wentian in the center, stood in the middle of the martial arena, facing off against each other. This storm seemed to be getting more and more intense. And at this moment, in the heart of the storm, above Qin Wentian's head, astral light abruptly flashed as his astral soul appeared. Looking at the color of the astral soul, one could tell that it originated from the third heavenly layer. This scene caused the eyes of Thousand Hands to narrow. He wasn't acquainted with Qin Wentian, and thus, he didn't know that Qin Wentian's first astral soul originated from the third heavenly layer. The third heavenly layer? What kind of background does this person have? No wonder Mustang is so protective of him. Upon seeing Qin Wentian's astral soul, many in the crowd sighed in their hearts. This matter was getting more and more interesting. Most probably, the Emperor Star Academy wouldn't allow a genius whose first astral soul originated from the third heavenly layer to perish. An expression of contemplation could be seen in Thousand Hands' eyes. This fellow was extremely prickly, but he did have the qualifications to be arrogant. He was considering how he should deal with Qin Wentian. Orkan, do it. Janus spoke in a low voice. Immediately, Orkan dashed towards Qin Wentian, while at the same time, Janus stood in front of Mustang, wanting to prevent Mustang from assisting Qin Wentian. Mountain stepped out as he released his astral soul. His entire person was akin to a wall, blocking Qin Wentian's path. Punching out with his fist, it felt as though countless boulders were smashing towards Orkan. Scram! Orkan roared in rage. Resplendent astral light radiated from his long spear, causing numerous pythons to frenziedly wreak havoc. Boulders unceasingly exploded as his long spear penetrated through everything. Mountain's countenance sank as he was forced to retreat. Although Orkan was impudent, he was definitely a character amongst the students of the Emperor Star Academy. Thousand Hands he was still observing from the sidelines. At this moment, Qin Wentian was as calm as ever. Since he didn't want to be suppressed by the Yi and O clan in the royal capital, he might as well prove his worth by standing on the arena of the Emperor Star Academy in front of everyone. An even more resplendent astral light radiated forth. Beside the heavenly hammer astral soul, Qin Wentian released his second astral soul, the Great Dream astral soul. Thousand Hands inclined his head as he gazed at the astral soul. In the next instant his gaze froze. The color of this astral soul was crimson gold. The Great Dream astral soul was enveloped within a crimson gold halo. Thousand Hands was a Yuanfu realm cultivator, and was also the disciplinary elder of the Emperor Star Academy. However, he had never imagined that there would be a day where he would be able to witness a crimson astral soul in the body of a 16-year-old youth. But today he had witnessed it. Not only him, everyone else had witnessed it as well. When the Great Dream astral soul with a crimson gold halo was released, all the fighting and killing seemed to have lost all meaning to its existence. The gazes of everyone were all focused on that astral soul. Qin Wentian's countenance was as calm as ever, but the gazes in the eyes of the spectators were completely different. This type of astral soul should be from the fourth heavenly layer, right? His first astral soul was condensed from an astral soul from the third heavenly layer, while his second astral soul was condensed from an astral soul from the fourth heavenly layer. Qin Wentian had made history in the history of the Emperor Star Academy, an unprecedented feat. Stop. In the skies above, a voice abruptly rang out, akin to the rumbling of thunder, jolting the spectators who were in a daze back to their senses. The pupils of Thousand Hands narrowed, as a look of reverence flashed in his eyes, after which he commanded, "Everyone stop. Those who disobey will be punished by the disciplinary hall." Everyone halted their battles in that instant. Their gazes were fixated on Qin Wentian, their countenances exceptionally fascinating. This was especially so for Janus and Orkan. The expressions on their faces could be said to be extremely rich to the extreme. Silence, deathly silence. The young man who killed Orphan had become the focus of everyone's attention, becoming the main character of today's event. Chapter 48. After Qin Wentian condensed his Great Dream's astral soul, he used the acupuncture technique to suppress the radiance of the astral soul. However, this time around he didn't suppress it by too much, only causing the golden red radiance to fade. Because he had already thought about it, with the influence of the Yi clan in the royal capital, if he didn't display sufficient talent to attract the attention of the higher-ups of the Emperor Star Academy, it would be extremely difficult for him to establish a foothold in the royal capital. He also didn't directly release the fifth layer of heavenly light. If it was too heaven-defying, there would be some people who would pay any price to kill him. Hence, the current scene appeared. When I was in the Sky Harmony City, I had already passed Teacher Mustang's test. Because of the Emperor Star Academy's promise, I traveled tens of thousands of miles to the royal capital to register. However, Janice didn't bestow me with the Emperor Star Jade Medallion, and instead wanted me to participate in the joint gathering of the 9 academies. I agreed. In the silent space, Qin Wentian slowly spoke. No one would disturb him, and in the entire space, only his voice could be heard. During the joint gathering of the 9 academies, Orphan gathered the other students to hunt me and Fan Lu down. They almost succeeded, but because Fan Lu ignited the power of his bloodline limit, we were able to defeat Orphan. However, at that moment Orphan appeared and said that Fan Lu and I had harmed a fellow student, and almost killed him on the spot. At that time, who in the Emperor Star Academy would enforce the law for us? After that, Orphan once again roped in experts at the arterial circulation realm to hunt us down, forcing us into desperate straits. Luckily, we were lucky and only returned alive after 10 days. The first thing we thought of was to return to the Emperor Star Academy to register, and when we saw Orphan, we were so enraged that we even tried to kill him. Let me ask you, what crime did we commit? Qin Wentian slowly recounted the events, and in addition to the talent he displayed, the crowd felt that Qin Wentian wasn't in the wrong. Not only that, according to Qin Wentian's words, not only was his talent extraordinary, that Fatty Fan Lu actually had the power of a bloodline limit. If this was the case, the Emperor Star Academy had no choice but to reconsider. If the Emperor Star Academy still feels that I'm guilty, then please do not accuse me of being a student of the Emperor Star Academy. I have yet to receive my Jade Medallion, and thus cannot be considered as a student of the Emperor Star Academy. Killing Orphan, just treat it as me coming to the Emperor Star Academy to take revenge. Qin Wentian's voice was still the same as before. Now, as for how to deal with this matter, I'll leave it up to you. As the sound of his voice faded, that dazzling astral soul vanished. However, the hearts of the crowd were still unable to calm down. It wasn't easy for me, Mustang, to obtain such a student. If the academy were to reject him and even punish him, there would be no meaning for me to be a teacher anymore. Mustang stared at Thousand Hands as he emotionlessly stated. Momentarily, all the pressure was concentrated on Thousand Hands, causing him to be in a difficult position. At this moment, he actually had no intention of convicting Qin Wentian. Otherwise, the higher-ups would probably blame him. He was afraid that there were higher-ups watching them now. Thinking of this, Thousand Hands couldn't help but feel depressed. If he didn't handle this matter well, there would be many people who would be unhappy with him. Naturally, the one who was the most depressed was none other than Janice. At the instant when Qin Wentian released his 2 astral souls, he already knew that Qin Wentian wouldn't die. Not only would he not die, he would even receive the attention of the higher-ups. And he, Janice, had offended a character with immense potential just like that. And there was also Orphan. He still hated Qin Wentian to the core, and wanted nothing more than to kill him on the spot. Although the cause of this matter was because of his relationship with Yi Wuke, and because of this he wanted to help Yi Wuke resolve this small problem. To him, this wasn't something difficult at all. But who would have thought that it would result in such a situation? However, no one would think that they were in the wrong. Hence, the person he hated was Qin Wentian. His younger brother, Orphan, was killed by Qin Wentian on the spot. Not only that, even if Qin Wentian killed Orphan, it would still be a waste of effort. How could Orphan not be enraged? Impudent. At this moment, Thousand Hands finally opened his mouth. What caused everyone to be astonished was that he directly berated Qin Wentian. What a load of nonsense. Since you participated in the examination of the Emperor Star Academy and survived the Dark Forest, how can you not be a student of the Academy? Thousand Hands berated Qin Wentian. The Emperor Star Jade Medallion is merely a formality. Since you have already chosen to enroll in the Emperor Star Academy, you are already a student of the Academy. Hence, I, Thousand Hands, as the disciplinary elder of the Emperor Star Academy, have the authority to discipline you. Although you took revenge for yourself today, the consequences of your actions are too severe. I have decided to temporarily imprison you for a month. At the same time, I will send people to investigate the matter in the Dark Forest. If what you said is true, then I will treat this battle as a private battle between you and Orphan, and have nothing to do with the academy. Naturally, if what you said is a lie, then I will. Thousand Hands seemed to have not thought of what he would do if Qin Wentian lied. He paused for a moment before adding, let's talk about it when the time comes. Come with me first. Pucci. Luo Huan laughed lightly, as she covered her mouth with her hands. A strange light flashed in her eyes. This was the first time she had seen the incorruptible and impartial elder Thousand Hands in such an awkward situation. Although Thousand Hands was berating Qin Wentian, everyone could hear the meaning behind his words. Regardless of whether Qin Wentian lied or not, Orphan had died for nothing. Not only that, Thousand Hands was obviously trying to drag Qin Wentian into the Emperor Star Academy, saying that Qin Wentian was now a student of the academy. Qin Wentian and Fan Lu exchanged glances, as traces of smiles could be seen in their eyes. Today they had finally managed to vent their anger. However, the expression in Orkhan's eyes was still as loathsome as ever. Fatty was thinking in his heart that if he could deal with Orkhan in the same manner, it would be perfect. Naturally, Fatty was only thinking about it. Towards those he couldn't defeat, Fatty's principle had always been that a gentleman could wait 10 years for revenge. Towards those he could defeat, Fatty's principle was that a hero wouldn't wait overnight for revenge. Hence, towards Orphan, Fatty chose to be a hero. Towards Orkhan, Fatty decided to be a gentleman. And you will also be confined as well. Reflect on your actions. Just when Fatty was fantasizing about being a hero or a gentleman, Thousand Hands berated him. However, Fatty didn't seem to care at all. Grinning, he patted Qin Wentian's shoulder. Good brothers, we will share hardships together. This is my brother, Qin Wentian. I, Fan Lu, will naturally accompany him. Fatty inclined his head, as though he was afraid that others wouldn't know that he and Qin Wentian were brothers. Shameless. This Fatty is too shameless. The spectators cursed in their hearts. This Fatty was simply showing off his strength. Naturally, only Qin Wentian knew that Fatty didn't know of Qin Wentian's talent when they were in the dark forest. Later on, when they were in danger, Fatty could have easily left by himself. However, Fatty didn't. Although Fatty was shameless, his shamelessness caused people to feel warmth in their hearts. The members of the disciplinary committee brought Qin Wentian and Fan Lu away. Mustang wasn't worried in the slightest. At the instant Qin Wentian released his astral blood astral soul, he already knew the outcome. Casting a glance at Janice, Mustang led his disciples away. The ranking battles continued, but the spectators were in no mood to continue. Their minds were still replaying the scenes from earlier. What happened in the Emperor Star Academy today would soon spread to the other academies. His name is Qin Wentian? How handsome! Some of the girls had love-struck expressions on their faces, as they recalled the scene of that unbridled youth killing Orphan on the spot. After which, he unleashed his talent, and became the #1 genius in the history of the Emperor Star Academy. Orkhan brought Orphan's corpse and left. He wanted to return to his clan, as news of what happened here would soon spread to his clan. Qin Wentian and Fan Lu were punished with confinement. However, they were confined in an extremely elegant courtyard with a small bridge over a flowing stream. This caused Fatty to sigh in admiration. Only a few beauties were missing, and the confinement would be perfect. Fatty was extremely happy, but at this moment, Thousand Hands was having a headache. At this moment, many people appeared in front of him, and all of them were elders of the academy. Elder Thousand Hands, I only wish to meet with Qin Wentian. This request isn't too overboard, right? At this moment, a tanned-looking tower-like man looked at Thousand Hands, requesting to meet with Qin Wentian. Thousand Hands, I guarantee that it won't take up too much of your time. I only want to have a casual chat with Qin Wentian. Another person smiled as he looked at Thousand Hands. Staring at the silhouettes in front of him, Thousand Hands felt a headache coming on. How could he not understand the thoughts of these people? Qin Wentian had yet to receive his Emperor Star Jade Medallion, so naturally, he hadn't joined any of the academies yet. Although Mustang had already seized the initiative, they still had a chance to tempt him. You bunch of bastards. At this moment, an explosive voice rang out, causing the crowd to fall silent. Turning their heads, they saw Mustang's face turning black. The crowd couldn't help but feel embarrassed in their hearts when they saw Mustang. However, their faces were still as serious as ever. Today is the last day of the ranking battle. Yet all of you are here. How are students supposed to choose their own teachers? Now the vice headmaster is already enraged. Do as you see fit. Mustang coldly snorted. After Thousand Hands brought Qin Wentian away, Mustang quickly discovered that the other teachers of the Emperor Star Academy had all slipped away. As the sound of Mustang's voice faded, the teachers of the Emperor Star Academy all disappeared in the blink of an eye. Thousand Hands shook his head as a bitter smile appeared on his face. Gazing at Mustang, Thousand Hands stated, "Mustang, the vice headmaster is enraged. You should quickly go as well." Mustang stared at Thousand Hands as he laughed. "Before that, can Elder Thousand Hands allow me to meet with my disciple, Qin Wentian? I have something to tell him." Thousand Hands froze as he contemplated Mustang. After which he laughed. "Mustang, the vice headmaster didn't even go, right?" Mustang couldn't help but to smile awkwardly after being exposed, causing Thousand Hands to be dumbfounded. He glared at Mustang. "You are ruthless. Go on in." Chapter 49. Upon noticing Mustang's arrival, Qin Wentian stood up to welcome him. With a smile in his eyes he called out, "Teacher Mustang." "Sit." Mustang smiled at the silhouette in front of him. Today, Qin Wentian had given him a huge surprise. "Qin Wentian, your guts aren't small. You actually dared to kill Orphan in front of so many people." Mustang stared at Qin Wentian as he continued. "The O clan is one of the most influential clans in the royal capital. Since you killed Orphan, I'm afraid they will definitely remember you." "Teacher Mustang, didn't you tell me that regardless of whether I killed Orphan or not, the power of the O clan would still be there?" Qin Wentian smiled as he replied. Ever since Orphan started hunting him down in the dark forest, there was no longer any leeway for reconciliation. Qin Wentian obviously didn't think that just because he had spared Orphan, the other party would be grateful to him and not make things difficult for him anymore. Although that's the case, if it weren't for the talent you revealed later on, I'm afraid that you would have been in grave danger. Luckily, everything has temporarily passed. The Emperor Star Academy will give you sufficient attention. Regardless of whether it's the Yi clan or the O clan, if they want to deal with you, they will have to consider the attitude of the Emperor Star Academy first. Mustang smiled as he continued. Naturally, your personal strength is the most important. After all, it's easy to dodge a spear in the open, but hard to guard against an arrow in the dark. If they want to kill someone, there are too many methods they can use. They can even leave no traces behind, making it impossible for others to trace back to them. Hence, you have to raise your cultivation as soon as possible, and at the same time, be careful when you leave the academy. Understood. Qin Wentian nodded his head. Oh yeah, I came here because I wanted to tell you about the current situation of the Emperor Star Academy. The history of the Emperor Star Academy is even longer than the Chu country. Its founder was the Azure Emperor. It's said that 3,000 years ago, there were only a few stellar martial cultivators here. Hence, the Azure Emperor established the Emperor Star Academy in an attempt to usher in the era of stellar martial cultivators. Mustang slowly continued. Currently, the Emperor Star Academy is composed entirely of stellar martial cultivators. There's a headmaster, 3 vice headmasters, 9 honorary elders, 36 elders, and an unknown number of guest elders. As for the rest, they are all students. Students of the Emperor Star Academy can only officially apply to graduate after they have stepped into Yuanfu. Hence, although the academy only accepts a few hundred students every batch, the vast majority of students require a long period of time before they can step into Yuanfu. Currently, the number of students in the Emperor Star Academy exceeds 3,000, and their teachers are the 36 elders as well as the guest elders. The guest elders are all students who have already stepped into Yuanfu. Even the guest elders are at the Yuanfu realm. Qin Wentian exclaimed in shock. The strength of the Emperor Star Academy was truly terrifying. The these guest elders are actually the disciples of the 36 elders. After they step into Yuanfu, they can apply to graduate. However, there are some who are willing to remain in the Emperor Star Academy to continue their cultivation, and they will be given the position of guest elders to assist their teachers in guiding the students. After all, for every batch of new students, only the top 30 have the right to choose their teachers, and they can directly enter the tutelage of an elder. As for the others, they will be guided by the guest elders under the tutelage of the elders. Of course, don't underestimate the strength of the guest elders. Some of the guest elders have already surpassed their teachers. Mustang smiled as he introduced. Qin Wentian and Fan Le both understood. In the future, if senior sister Luohuan or senior brother Mountain stepped into Yuanfu and were willing to stay in the Emperor Star Academy, they would become the guest elders under Mustang. For this year's batch, I have yet to accept any disciples. Are the two of you willing? Mustang stared at Qin Wentian and Fan Le, finally revealing the reason for his visit. Qin Wentian nodded his head. The reason why he came to the Emperor Star Academy was because of Mustang. Naturally, he would become Mustang's disciple. However, at this moment, Qin Wentian's eyes flickered as he laughed mischievously. Boss, there are 36 elders in the academy. I'm sure many of them would want to accept you as their disciple. Why don't we wait and see first? Mustang froze when he heard Fan Le's words. Looking at the shameless expression on Fatty's face, he really wanted to give him a good beating. This shameless fellow actually dared to openly ask for a disciple gift? How arrogant. Turning his head, Mustang saw that Qin Wentian was also smiling at him. Instantly, his hatred for Fatty intensified. Reaching into his robes, Mustang retrieved 2 secret manuals and passed them to Qin Wentian. This is a cultivation art and an innate technique. The cultivation art is at the high grade of Yuanfu, sufficient to support you all the way to Yuanfu. As for the innate technique, it's at the mid-grade of Earth grade. Usually, only Yuanfu cultivators would be able to unleash the full power of the innate technique. The cultivation art was divided according to cultivation level. The Yuanfu cultivation art could support Wuxia all the way to Yuanfu, while the Heavenly Dipper cultivation art could support Wuxia all the way to Heavenly Dipper. Innate techniques could be divided into 3 levels and 9 grades. The 3 levels were the heavenly, earthly, and human levels. The human level corresponded to the arterial circulation realm, while the earthly level corresponded to the Yuanfu realm. Many thanks, teacher. Qin Wentian didn't stand on ceremony as he received the 2 manuals. The word teacher was extremely passionate, causing Mustang to roll his eyes. But soon after, a smile appeared on his face. The matter regarding Qin Wentian had finally come to an end. Teacher, what about me? Fan Le winked at Mustang. Mustang looked at Fan Le as he grinned. Whether or not I accept you as my disciple, I still need to consider it carefully. Don't be like this, teacher. I know I'm in the wrong. Fan Le's countenance sank, causing both Qin Wentian and Mustang to burst out laughing. This Fatty was too shameless. Fatty, I already have a suitable cultivation art for you to cultivate. This is for you. Qin Wentian passed the cultivation art to Fan Le, while keeping the innate technique for himself. Many thanks. What is this innate technique? Fan Le moved to the side of Qin Wentian, as he whispered, 1,000 hands imprint. This innate technique is exceedingly difficult to cultivate. When cultivated to the highest level, one would be able to unleash the 1,000 hands imprint with unimaginable might. Elder 1,000 Hands became famous because he cultivated this technique, earning him the title of Elder 1,000 Hands. Qin Wentian, you have to study it well. Mustang reminded Qin Wentian. I will. Qin Wentian nodded. He had already mastered the dragon subduing fist, and he already had the spirit refinement method and the dreamcast art. Now that he had obtained the 1,000 Hands imprint, it was naturally for the best. Okay, this is your Emperor Star Jade Medallion. During this 1 month of seclusion, cultivate well. When you guys come out, I will get your senior brothers and sisters to bring you to understand the situation of the academy. After speaking, Mustang stood up and left. Fatty winked at Qin Wentian before he left to study the innate technique. Qin Wentian flipped through the pages of the 1,000 Hands imprint. This innate technique looked extremely simple, and there were only 5 forms to it: diamond imprint, revolving sea imprint, emptiness imprint, desolation imprint, and great thousand hands imprint. The first form, diamond imprint, was extremely strong and unyielding, possessing boundless might. The second form, revolving sea imprint, was akin to waves crashing against each other, containing a hint of softness amidst the hardness, containing boundless might. As for the great thousand hands imprint, the palm imprints emitted were akin to a 1,000-armed Buddha, capable of crushing the heavens and earth. Although this thousand hands imprint is tyrannical, it consumes a great deal of yuan energy. Only by condensing yuan energy into a terrifying palm imprint would one be able to unleash such a fearsome attack. Qin Wentian mumbled to himself. The stronger the attack, the more yuan energy it consumed. Spirit refinement method, divine imprints. Qin Wentian suddenly thought of a possibility. The first level of the spirit refinement method required the user to condense divine energy, using first-level divine imprints. In that case, if he were to condense divine energy using palm imprints in tandem with this thousand hands imprint, how terrifying would the power be? As he thought of this, Qin Wentian's heart pounded. In his memories there was a palm imprint divine imprint. This type of divine imprint could be used to forge divine weapons that could amplify one's attack power. With this idea in mind, Qin Wentian started to put it into practice, and started to cultivate the spirit refinement method. The cultivation of the spirit refinement method was extremely difficult, and it consumed a great deal of astral energy. The vast amount of astral energy could only be condensed into a single divine imprint, after which, using a special method, the astral energy would be condensed into a single granule of divine energy, which would then be stored in one's acupuncture points. This process was exceedingly slow, and after which, Qin Wentian gradually became able to enter the shallow dreamscape. Hence, he began to cultivate in his dreams, condensing his divine energy. In the shallow dreamscape, the speed at which he absorbed the astral energy from the 9 heavenly layers was much faster. In the future, if he were to enter the dream creation and dream forgetting realms, the speed at which he could absorb the astral energy would definitely be even faster, and he would be able to make up for the time spent on cultivating the spirit refinement method. Of course, after this month, Qin Wentian would still have to think of ways to obtain more yuan meteor stones to support his cultivation. As time flowed by, Qin Wentian's cultivation of the spirit refinement method gradually reached the entry level, and the speed at which he condensed his divine energy increased. Sometimes he would even sleep for 3 to 4 days, cultivating in his dreams. This caused Fatty to be so bored that he was about to go crazy. He really wanted to leave this place earlier, and interact more with the beautiful female students of this batch. A month's time quickly passed. Qin Wentian directly slept in the pavilion as the astral light from the heavens cascaded down onto his body, flowing into his arterial pathways. After which, the astral energy from the astral light converged together, unceasingly condensing into the shape of a palm. After which, the astral energy was gradually compressed, and finally flowed through the arterial pathways to be stored in his acupuncture points. In this month of cultivation, not only did Qin Wentian master the entry level of the spirit refinement method, he also mastered the first stance of the thousand hands imprint. At the same time, he also expanded the size of his acupuncture points, allowing him to store even more astral energy from the astral light. When the astral energy reached the limit, that would be the time when the second arterial pathway would be formed, signifying that he had stepped into the second level of the arterial circulation realm. Obviously, breaking through to the arterial circulation realm was much more difficult compared to breaking through to the body refinement realm. The amount of astral energy that could be stored in Qin Wentian's body had already increased by 6 to 7 times compared to when he first broke through. However, he still hadn't managed to form his second arterial pathway. From this, one could see that the disparity between every level of the arterial circulation realm was extremely great. The reason why Qin Wentian was able to defeat Orphan was because his instantaneous burst of strength was too overwhelming, directly crushing Orphan. If it was a battle of attrition, he definitely wouldn't be able to win, because the amount of astral energy in his body was far inferior compared to his opponent. Chapter 50. Qin Wentian and Fan Le finally saw Thousand Hands again. These few days, although there had been people delivering food to them, Thousand Hands had yet to appear. Elder. Qin Wentian stood up and called out. MHM. Thousand Hands nodded. Qin Wentian, the matter has been investigated. Someone is willing to testify for what happened in the dark forest. Orphan had indeed brought people to hunt you down. As for what happened on the stage a month ago, the disciplinary committee has already announced to the public that it was a matter of personal vendetta. Your punishment is to be confined for a month, and your ranking will be the last amongst the new students. Qin Wentian had a smile on his face when he heard Thousand Hands' words. It was absolutely forbidden to kill a fellow student within the academy. Yet the disciplinary committee had used the word personal vendetta to explain the punishment. It was obvious that the disciplinary committee was biased towards him. Qin Wentian naturally understood this point. Not only that, this punishment couldn't even be considered a punishment. It was merely a 1-month period of closed-door seclusion. Such an obvious bias could be seen by everyone in the academy. However, this was reality. As long as you had enough talent, you would be able to enjoy extraordinary treatment. Many thanks, Elder. Qin Wentian smiled as he thanked Thousand Hands. After bidding farewell, he and Fan Le left the courtyard together. Just as they exited, a white blur leapt into Qin Wentian's embrace. Little Rascal stretched out its head and rubbed its face against Qin Wentian's. In front of Qin Wentian, a seductive silhouette stood there. Her eyes were filled with charm as she stared at him. Female vixen. Fatty's eyes instantly lit up as he stared unblinkingly at Luo Huan's ample bosom. This figure, TSK. Fatty was already swallowing his saliva. Senior sister. Qin Wentian smiled as he walked forward. Luo Huan similarly walked towards Qin Wentian, hooking her arm around Qin Wentian's as she smiled. Little fellow, you've finally come out. Feeling the softness on his arm, Qin Wentian immediately smiled bitterly. Could she not tempt him like this? After all, he was at the age of 16, a hot-blooded age. Fatty jogged forward, arriving at the other side of Luo Huan. After which he obediently called out, Senior sister. Luo Huan glanced at Fan Le, only to see that Fan Le's arm was slightly bent, as though he was waiting for Luo Huan to do the same. This scene caused Luo Huan to be stunned for a moment, but she soon recovered and smiled at Fan Le. Senior sister, I'm Brother Wentian. Fatty took the initiative to approach Luo Huan. Luo Huan laughed and hooked her arm around Fatty's. Momentarily, an intoxicated expression appeared on Fatty's face. Was Fatty's spring finally here? Gotcha. Fatty let out a painful howl and immediately squatted on the ground, hugging his right arm. His forehead was dripping with sweat. Lifting his head, Fatty saw Luo Huan hugging Qin Wentian as they walked away. Tears welled up in his eyes. They were all brothers, but why was there such a huge disparity in treatment? Shouldn't they share blessings together? Boss, wait for me. Fatty gritted his teeth and ran forward. It seemed like he would have to follow his boss in the future. The Emperor Star Academy was extremely vast, with many buildings. It had the Enforcement Hall, Elder Hall, Glory Hall, and the Student Association. Naturally, the Enforcement Hall, Elder Hall, and Glory Hall were all unique. The Student Association was formed by the students of the Emperor Star Academy. The strongest student associations in the Emperor Star Academy were the Azura, Sky Fiend, Night, and Green Cloud associations. Other than this, there were 3 most important places in the Emperor Star Academy. The first place was the Heavenly Star Pavilion. The Heavenly Star Pavilion contained a vast amount of cultivation arts and innate techniques. The second place was the Astral River Hall. Within it, the pressure from the astral rivers could be simulated, and it could temper a stellar martial cultivator's astral perception, as well as their ability to withstand pressure. This allowed stellar martial cultivators to continuously squeeze out their potential, striving to break through their limits and condense an even higher grade of astral soul. The third place was the Dream Sky Forest. This place was even more mystical. It was an incomparably gigantic dreamscape, and as long as one entered it, they would be brought into a dreamscape. This dreamscape was connected to the 4 great academies of the royal capital: the Emperor Star Academy, the Royal Academy, the Divine Wind Academy, and the Seven Stars Academy. Heavenly Star Pavilion, Astral River Hall, Dream Sky Forest. Qin Wentian mumbled in a low voice. After listening to Luo Huan's introduction, his heart trembled. The Emperor Star Academy was undoubtedly the #1 power in the Chu country. Even people from other countries would travel thousands of miles just to be a part of it. These 3 wondrous places played an extremely important role. Senior sister, what's the deal with the Dream Sky Forest? Why is it connected to the other 3 academies? Qin Wentian curiously asked. The Dream Sky Forest was created by an expert from my Emperor Star Academy, who was proficient in dreamscapes. In the beginning, it was only connected to the Emperor Star Academy, allowing the students of the Emperor Star Academy to enter a state of combat at any time without losing their lives. After that, the other 3 academies sought the help of the senior from the Emperor Star Academy. The senior from the Emperor Star Academy also felt that if there were more experts participating in the dreamscape, the students of the Emperor Star Academy would be able to temper themselves better. Luo Huan explained. Hence, the senior from the Emperor Star Academy went to each of the 4 academies and used a special innate technique to create this dreamscape, connecting the 4 academies in the dreamscape. This was an advantage for the students of the Emperor Star Academy, as the students of the Emperor Star Academy all gained immense combat prowess from the dreamscape created by the senior from the Emperor Star Academy. Not only that, there were some extraordinary geniuses among them who were extremely willing to use the dreamscape to challenge the students of the Emperor Star Academy in order to temper themselves. This senior's heart is truly magnanimous, and he's willing to benefit others. Qin Wentian laughed. There's no death in the dreamscape, so of course they'd be more than happy to improve their strength. A seductive smile appeared on Luo Huan's face as she stared at Qin Wentian. Junior brother, don't underestimate this dreamscape. That's an extremely deep dreamscape, and the yuan energy of your true body would be expended during combat. Not only that, the taste of death, if you've experienced it before, I believe that no one would be willing to experience it a second time. Qin Wentian's countenance stiffened, before he smiled and nodded his head. Currently, he was also cultivating the dreamcast art, so he naturally knew how realistic dreamscapes were. This was especially so for the 2nd and 3rd levels of the dreamcast art. The 2nd level, Creation Dreamscape, allowed one to immerse themselves in the dreamscape. In the dreamscape, death would be an extremely realistic feeling. That kind of feeling would definitely not be good. And according to the records of the dreamcast art, upon reaching the 3rd level, the Oblivion Dreamscape, the dreamscape would no longer be considered a dream. If one died in the dreamscape, their brain would be stimulated, and their true body would die as well. The intensity of the dreamscape in the Dream Sky Forest should be equivalent to the 2nd level of the dreamcast art, Creation Dreamscape. This dreamscape was created for the students of the 4 great academies to cultivate. Boss, why don't we go to the 7th level of the Heavenly Star Pavilion and choose some supreme innate techniques? Fan Li's eyes lit up as he stared at Qin Wentian. Luo Huan smiled faintly as she looked at Fan Li. From what I know, junior brother Qin is currently ranked last amongst the freshmen, while you are ranked 2nd to last. Your Emperor Star Jade Medallion should still be at the 1st level, and you can only enter the 1st level of the Heavenly Star Pavilion to choose the simplest innate techniques. Qin Wentian and Fan Li were both depressed. They were actually ranked last and 2nd. What about the Astral River Hall? Fan Li asked again. Same, you can only enter the 1st level. Don't tell me that we can't even enter the Dream Sky Forest? There's no restriction in the Dream Sky Forest, you can enter at any time. Luo Huan smiled as she continued. Let me send you guys to your lodgings first. You guys can then decide if you want to enter the Dream Sky Forest. Right. Qin Wentian and Fan Li both nodded their heads. Luo Huan brought the 2 of them to the lodgings of the freshmen. The rooms were extremely simple, causing Fan Li to sigh in admiration. So confinement wasn't a punishment, but a reward instead. Every batch of freshmen, this place would always be fully occupied. I'm afraid there won't be any more rooms left. Luo Huan smiled as she walked towards the side of the building, only to discover that all the rooms were already occupied. Only when they arrived at the outskirts of the Dream Sky Forest did they discover a small, unoccupied house. The environment here isn't bad. We'll reach the Dream Sky Forest in just a step. Luo Huan smiled. The freshmen's lodgings were situated right next to the Dream Sky Forest, allowing them to enter the Dream Sky Forest to temper themselves. Senior sister, where will you be staying? Fan Le pitifully looked at Luo Huan. This place was a little too simple and crude. Don't even think about it. When you raise the grade of your Emperor Star Jade Medallion to the 4th level, you'll be able to choose the villa you want to stay in. Luo Huan smiled as she continued. Work hard. How do I raise the grade of my Emperor Star Jade Medallion? Fan Lo asked. This was also a question that Qin Wentian wanted to know the answer to. It seemed that if one wanted to enjoy good resources, they would have to raise the grade of their Emperor Star Jade Medallion. The rankings of freshmen are determined by the Glory Institute. For freshmen, those ranked below 30 will have their Emperor Star Jade Medallion upgraded to the 1st level. From the 30th to the 4th level, the Emperor Star Jade Medallion upgraded to the 2nd level. From the 3rd level to the 3rd level, the Emperor Star Jade Medallion upgraded to the 3rd level. However, if you want to raise the grade from the 3rd level to the 4th level, you'll have to hand over 102nd layer Yuan Meteor Stones to the Glory Institute. From the 4th level to the 5th level, you'll have to hand over 302nd layer Yuan Meteor Stones. From the 6th level to the 7th level. Stop! Qin Wentian shouted, silently wiping away the cold sweat in his heart. From the 5th level to the 6th level, 1002nd layer Yuan Meteor Stones? Was she trying to scare him to death? Luo Huan giggled as she looked at Qin Wentian. The Emperor Star Academy has to provide for so many people. Do you think it doesn't require resources? These resources can't be obtained by the elders, right? Naturally, we have to depend on the students. Only by doing so will we be able to temper all of you. Even so, there's no need to be so ruthless. Qin Wentian mumbled. Ruthless? Luo Huan laughed. With the 6th level of the Emperor Star Jade Medallion, one can already enter the 6th level of the Heavenly Star Pavilion. The cultivation arts there are already at the peak of Yuanfu, and even the innate techniques there are at the superior grade of Earth grade. 1002nd layer Yuan Meteor Stones is only equivalent to 10-3nd layer Yuan Meteor Stones. This price is simply too low. Upon hearing Luo Huan's words, Qin Wentian froze for a moment, but after some thought, he realized that it was indeed the case. The 6th level of the Heavenly Star Pavilion was already extremely useful for cultivators at the later 3 levels of Yuanfu. Not only that, 1002nd layer Yuan Meteor Stones wasn't considered much at all. However, Qin Wentian couldn't help but feel depressed in his heart. In the past, in the Sky Harmony City, the first heavenly layer Yuan Meteor Stones were extremely valuable. This was because the amount of Yuan Meteor Stones in the Sky Harmony City was extremely low. Every single Yuan Meteor Stone represented a chance to nurture a stellar martial cultivator. Hence, everyone treated it as a treasure. But in the royal capital, it was completely different. Chapter 51. Fatty rolled his eyes. If the 6th level of the Heavenly Star Pavilion was already at the peak of Yuanfu, then what about the 7th, 8th and 9th levels? Senior sister, could it be that there are Heavenly Dipper cultivation arts and innate techniques on the 6th level? Luo Huan smiled at Fatty. In the thousands of years of history of the Emperor Star Academy, is it really that strange to have Heavenly Dipper cultivation arts? But as for what exactly, I have no idea. After all, I've never been there before. Even if there were Heavenly Dipper cultivation arts, it didn't mean that one would be able to cultivate to the Heavenly Dipper realm. The most important factor was still the talent of the cultivator. With the thousands of years of history of the Emperor Star Academy, it wasn't strange for them to have Heavenly Dipper cultivation arts and innate techniques. Not only that, can you afford to pay the price? Luo Huan smiled as she continued. If you guys are unable to enter the top 30, you can also use your Yuan Meteor Stones to upgrade your grade to the 3rd level. If you guys wish to advance further, but you don't have enough Yuan Meteor Stones, You can head to the Glory Institute to accept missions and obtain virtual Yuan meteor stones to upgrade your grade. A mission with 1000-second heavenly layer Yuan meteor stones. I don't even dare to think about it. Fatty mumbled. I thought that the Emperor Star Academy would use Yuan meteor stones to nurture me, but who would have thought? The Emperor Star Academy has given you the best cultivation environment, as well as a competitive environment. If you can't fight for it, you can only blame your own incompetence. If everyone were to rely on the Emperor Star Academy to nurture them, then the Emperor Star Academy wouldn't be called the Emperor Star Academy. Luo Huan smiled as she continued. Okay, next, enjoy yourselves. There will be a surprise in store for you guys. Lastly, let me remind you that it is absolutely forbidden to disturb the dreamscape of others. After speaking, Luo Huan departed. Fatty was somewhat reluctant to part with her, but he didn't dare to follow her. He could only follow Qin Wentian and clean up the place. Shall we go to the Dream Sky Forest for a stroll? Fatty smiled as he looked at Qin Wentian. Yes. Qin Wentian nodded his head. He also wanted to experience the wonders of the Dream Sky Forest for himself. After exiting the room, they slowly walked towards the depths of the Dream Sky Forest. Instantly, a wave of drowsiness assaulted their senses, causing them to feel dizzy. How powerful! This senior's strength should be at the pinnacle of Yuanfu. To be able to create a dreamscape, he must have borrowed the power of an array formation. Qin Wentian guessed. He saw many figures lying under the ancient trees. Obviously, they were all disciples who had entered the dreamland. Beauty. However, Fatty didn't think too much about it. He looked around with his bright eyes and discovered that a young girl had also entered the Dream Sky Forest. She slowly sat down under an ancient tree and fell asleep. Under Qin Wentian's speechless gaze, the fatty ran directly to the girl's side, lay down under the ancient tree and closed his eyes. This made Qin Wentian secretly wipe his sweat. This bastard is too much of a bastard. Drowsiness engulfed him unceasingly. Qin Wentian could only walk to the back of the ancient tree, where Fatty was resting, and close his eyes. Very swiftly he fell into a deep slumber. In the dreamland, Qin Wentian surveyed his surroundings. At this moment he was actually in the middle of a city. Occasionally he could see the silhouettes of others. Fan Lu and the young girl were not far from him. Because they had entered the dreamland under an ancient tree, their positions weren't too far apart. Hello, my name is Fan Lu. Is this your first time entering the dreamland of the Dream Sky Forest? Fan Lu asked the young girl. No, I've been here a few times. My name is Sheena. I've seen you before during the ranking battle. How awe-inspiring. The young girl smiled as she looked at Fan Lu. That day, when Qin Wentian and Fan Lu killed Orphan on the arena, all the new students had witnessed it with their own eyes. Hence Qin Wentian and Fan Lu were worshipped by many. Oh. Fatty seemed to be somewhat embarrassed as he smiled shyly. In order to avenge my brother, I wouldn't hesitate to risk my life. Luckily, I managed to escape unscathed and met a beauty the moment I entered the Dream Sky Forest. Sheena's face reddened. She was somewhat embarrassed by Fatty's words. Cough, cough. Qin Wentian coughed, interrupting the conversation between the two of them. He had to save this pure and innocent girl from her predicament. Qin Wentian. Joy appeared on Sheena's face as her eyes shone with a bright light. In this 1 month, Qin Wentian had become the hottest topic among the new students. On the first day he entered the Emperor Star Academy, he killed Orphan in a domineering manner, and at the same time, he released his 4th heavenly layer astral soul, becoming the first person in the history of the Emperor Star Academy. Seeing the look on Sheena's face, Fatty stared at Qin Wentian with a hint of bitterness in his eyes. How could he destroy the feelings of others like this? Sheena, can you tell us more about the dreamland you were in? Qin Wentian stared at the city in front of him, his heart filled with shock. Those who cultivated the mandate of dreams could bring others into their dreamland, and the others would have their own consciousness. Just like when he cultivated the Dreamcast art, he knew what he wanted to do in his dreamland. Now it was the same. They had their own consciousness. But the dreamland they were in was a dreamland created by others. This was the power of dreamland. It was as real as reality. The city in this dreamland is known as the City of Illusions. After those from the 4 great academies entered, they would directly appear in this city. Because the dreamland is an illusory existence, you can do whatever you want in the dreamland without any restrictions. Hence, the city is extremely chaotic, with endless battles between the various academies. Especially between the various academies, there would often be intense battles, tempering one's combat prowess. Sheena slowly continued. There are also those who love to battle, and they would go around looking for people to challenge, tempering themselves. How do I exit the dreamland? Qin Wentian asked. If this was his own dreamland, he could rely on his own consciousness to exit it. But this was a dreamland created by others, and it wasn't so easy to exit it. Do you see those towering structures? Sheena pointed to a tower-like structure in the distance, so tall that it seemed to touch the heavens. Not only that, there were a few other tower-like structures in the distance. There's a door at the bottom of these structures. You can exit after entering it. Sheena smiled as she replied, of course, other than this method, you can also exit by dying. However, no one would be willing to try dying. Boss, aren't you going to look for senior sister Luo Huan? You go first, I'll follow Sheena around. Fatty saw that Sheena's attention was completely focused on Qin Wentian, and he couldn't help but interject. Qin Wentian glanced at Fatty, only to see Fatty continuously winking at him, causing Qin Wentian to silently despise this wretched fellow. Okay, I'll go look for senior sister Luo Huan, you guys go ahead. Qin Wentian granted Fatty's wish. As he turned and departed, Sheena could only bring Fatty along to explore the City of Illusions. This city was extremely vast, and one could see the silhouettes of people everywhere. Occasionally there would even be people fighting. At this moment, Qin Wentian furrowed his brows. His acute senses told him that someone was staring at him. Qin Wentian didn't bat an eyelid as he continued to stroll around the city. However, this time around, he was heading in the direction of a tower-like structure. This way, he would be able to exit at any time. At the same time that Qin Wentian had this feeling, Fatty also felt that he was being stared at. His eyes narrowed as he smiled at Sheena. Sheena, you go ahead and explore by yourself. I have some matters to attend to, so I'll have to return first. Sheena was somewhat puzzled, but she soon nodded her head as she replied. But right now, we're quite far away from the exit. If you want to exit, you'll have to walk in the direction that Qin Wentian went earlier. I understand. Fatty laughed as he continued walking forward, as though he hadn't heard Sheena's words. At this moment, from the various corners of the city, several silhouettes suddenly appeared. Fatty abruptly halted his steps as his countenance turned unsightly. He had been surrounded. Knights Association. Sheena's countenance stiffened when she saw that these people were all clad in robes with the insignia of a knight. This was the Knights Association, one of the 4 strongest student associations. They wanted to deal with Fatty. Fatty, quickly run, they're from the Knights Association. Sheena reminded from behind. Fatty could only smile bitterly. He wanted to run, but the cultivation bases of these people were all higher than him. There was no way for him to escape. The members of the Knights Association continued to press forward, manifesting astral spears in their hands as killing intent gushed forth. This caused Sheena's countenance to turn pale. They wanted to kill Fatty. From afar, there were several spectators who were familiar with Fatty. They couldn't help but to silently muse that Fatty was truly unlucky this time. A raging wind gusted by as over 10 members of the Knights Association simultaneously rushed towards Fatty. That terrifying astral wind was so strong that it felt as though it could tear space apart. Fatty knew that he would die for sure. Hence, he closed his eyes and chose not to resist. Ah! Miserable screams reverberated through the air, causing many in the crowd to turn their gazes over. When they saw what was happening, their hearts trembled violently. Numerous long spears pierced through Fan Li's hands, legs, and other parts of his body. The only 2 fatal points that weren't pierced were his heart and chest. Hence Fan Lo, who had always wanted to die, was still alive. But this kind of life was worse than death. You are all senior students. How can you treat him like this? Sheena's face was completely pale. These people were all experts of the Knights Association, yet they dared to treat a newbie like this. You want to try too? A pair of cold eyes stared at her. Sheena was so scared that she didn't dare to speak. Too ruthless. The people in the distance were also speechless. The Knights Union was one of the 4 strongest student unions, and now, they were dealing with a newcomer. This was indeed vicious. Is this really a fucking dream? The fat man gritted his teeth, his body bleeding profusely. He raised his head and saw a figure standing at the top of a building, his night robe fluttering in the wind. A member of the Knights Association, Orkan. Chapter 52. Orkan's sharp gaze seemed to penetrate through space as he stared at Fan Lu, his eyes filled with an incomparable coldness. A month ago, he brought Orfan's corpse back to the clan. At that time, he couldn't forget the looks the entire clan had when they looked at him. Such humiliation, he would definitely make them pay for it. Son of a bitch, if you don't kill me, I will kill you sooner or later. Fan Lu grinned as fresh blood seeped out from the corner of his mouth. When Qin Wentian heard Fan Li's screams of agony, he madly sprinted back to where Fan Lu was. The members of the Knights Association also appeared around him, but they didn't obstruct him from running towards Fan Li's location. Instead, they followed behind him, as though they wanted him to witness Fan Li's miserable state. When Qin Wentian arrived, Fan Lu was already covered in blood. Sheena was not far away from him, her body trembling uncontrollably. She had never imagined that this dreamscape would be so cruel and torturous. Fatty. Qin Wentian's eyes were bloodshot. Fan Lu struggled to turn his head, only to see Qin Wentian grinning from ear to ear. Boss, wake me up. That won't do. He's in extreme pain in the dream world. If he's woken up directly outside, it'll cause terrible consequences. It's very likely that he'll lose his mind. At this moment, silhouettes appeared on the roofs of the surrounding buildings. The one who spoke was none other than Luo Huan. She stared at Orkan as she said in a cold voice, "The Knights Association has sent out so many experts just to deal with a single new student. How shameless." Orkan didn't bother with Luo Huan. His cold and arrogant eyes stared down at Qin Wentian as he coldly stated, "I only want him to understand a principle. In this land, talent doesn't mean everything. There's still a long way to go, so be prepared to accept the baptism of reality." Kill. Orkan spat out a single word. In an instant, the experts of the Knights Association charged towards Qin Wentian. Buzz. Luo Huan and the rest directly leaped downwards. While in the air, Luo Huan spoke to Qin Wentian. "Remember, in the dreamscape, if you are facing a mortal enemy, the best ending for the loser would be death." Qin Wentian stared at the experts of the Knights Association rushing towards him. Abruptly, he took a step forward, causing the ground to tremble. A terrifying spear light shot out like a poisonous dragon. Qin Wentian slightly shifted his body, allowing a long spear to pierce into his heart. At the same time, his dragon-subduing fist struck out with a terrifying power. With a loud bang, the head of the person in front of him exploded. At the same time, Qin Wentian also died in his dream. Even if he were to die, he would drag someone down with him. Phew! In the dream sky forest, Qin Wentian opened his eyes as he took in deep breaths of air. His heart pounded rapidly. Earlier, he had truly experienced death. Such a feeling, even though he knew it was just a dream, it still caused him to feel despair. Drawing in a few deep breaths, Qin Wentian had yet to calm his heart. He directly rushed towards Fan Lu, only to see the chubby body of Fan Lu trembling uncontrollably. The flesh on his face was contorted in agony, as though he was experiencing something extremely painful. Fatty! Qin Wentian clenched his fists tightly. Seeing Fatty in such agony, his heart was filled with pain as well. Fatty suddenly let out a blood-curdling scream as he opened his eyes. His entire person was sprawled on the ground, gasping for breath as his entire body convulsed. Son of a bitch. Fatty took a long time to regain his composure before raising his head. His eyes narrowed as a cold light flickered within. Are there any problems with your body? Qin Wentian nervously stared at Fatty. Don't worry, it's just a dream. Fatty grinned, as though he didn't mind at all. However, the cold glint in the depths of his eyes betrayed him. Evidently, As long as one had experienced that kind of torture, they would never be able to forget it. No, I want to sleep again. Let's leave this place first. Standing up, Qin Wentian and Fan Lo hurried out of the dormitory. How did you get out? Qin Wentian asked. Senior sister Luo Huan personally killed me. If not, I'm afraid I wouldn't have been able to get out. Fan Lo replied. The Knights Association really gave us a lively lesson on the first day. This lesson was indeed lively. Qin Wentian nodded his head. The two of them returned to their dormitory and rested for a period of time, after which, they walked out of their rooms, only to discover that many students were already heading out. Hurry up, the Knights Association and the Green Cloud Association are about to clash. There's going to be a good show. Someone exclaimed. Qin Wentian and Fan Le glanced at each other before following after the crowd. The lesson the Knights Association had given them was enough to be engraved in their hearts. Not long after, they arrived at an empty plot of land in the Emperor Star Academy. There were many people gathered there, and in the middle, there were two groups of old students standing opposite each other, exuding a terrifying cold intent. Orkan. Qin Wentian abruptly shifted his gaze in a certain direction. Orkan and the rest had already exited the Dream Sky Forest, bringing along the members of the Knights Association. Senior sister Luo Huan is here as well. In another direction, Luo Huan and the rest were there. Luo Huan and the rest were from the Green Cloud Association. Qin Wentian and Fan Le walked towards them. Senior sister. Qin Wentian called out to Luo Huan. Luo Huan's beautiful eyes glanced over, before shifting her gaze onto Fan Le. Smiling, she asked, "You've woken up from the dream. Do you still remember it?" "I can't forget it. It's engraved in my heart." Fatty grinned. "That's good. Don't blame senior sister for not warning you guys about the dangers of the Dream Sky Forest. There are some things that can only be understood after experiencing the pain. Consider this as a lesson from the Knights Association. Although this lesson was a little painful, it's still just the beginning of your life in the Emperor Star Academy. Remember, the Emperor Star Academy isn't a greenhouse. I'll only tell you the most basic things. As for the rest, you'll have to experience it yourself." Luo Huan smiled at the two of them. "Do you hate the Knights Association?" "Of course." Fatty laughed. "Then think of a way to trample them under our feet. If not, we'll be trampled under our feet, just like in the dream." Luo Huan continued smiling. That smile of hers contained hints of wisdom and farsightedness. The Knights Association is truly impressive. To think of so many experts to ambush two new students in the City of Illusions. Luo Huan inclined her head, staring at the members of the Knights Association. Her beautiful eyes at this moment flickered with a cold light. "So what of it?" Orkan faintly stated, as he glanced at Qin Wentian and Fan Le. His countenance was as cold as ice. "This is only the beginning." Shameless trash. Mountain's temper was extremely bad, as he roared at the members of the Knights Association. "You don't have the qualifications to speak to me." Orkan swept a glance at Mountain before shifting his gaze onto Luo Huan. A faint smile could be seen on his face as he continued. "The Knights Association and Green Cloud Association have been fighting for so long. Why don't we take a break and play some new tricks?" "How do you want to play?" Luo Huan inquired. "My Knights Association has recruited 2 new students, and your Green Cloud Association has one as well. How about a 4-man battle?" Orkan laughed as he looked at Luo Huan, causing her countenance to turn unsightly. Everyone knew that the Knights Association was the one that attracted the most new students. The reason was simple. The members of the Knights Association were all descendants of nobility. The Emperor Star Academy was established to nurture the most outstanding stellar martial cultivators. Here there were no boundaries, only talent and ability. There were many nobles in the royal capital, and the descendants of those nobles weren't like the silk pants that many people imagined. Although there were some silk pants among them, there were also many who were extremely outstanding. In addition to the resources they had, many descendants of the nobles chose to enroll in the Emperor Star Academy. After that, they gradually formed a power which was known as the Knights Association. The establishment of the Knights Association caused a storm of nobility within the Emperor Star Academy, and the Green Cloud Association was born. They believed that the Emperor Star Academy was a clean place, and that there shouldn't be any atmosphere of nobility. They didn't care if you were a noble or not, but they hated such an atmosphere. Hence, the Knights Association and the Green Cloud Association had always stood on opposite sides, and gradually, they became mortal enemies. Long before the Knights Association and the Green Cloud Association were formed, the Heavenly Demon Association had already existed. The Heavenly Demon Association was the only alliance of students in the Emperor Star Academy, and they had the longest history. The Azura Association was the last to be established. They couldn't be bothered with such matters, and only focused on improving their own strength. The members of the Azura Association were the most ruthless towards themselves, and they would spend most of their time in the dark forest to temper themselves. Out of the 4 alliances, the wealthiest was naturally the Knights Association. This wealth was sufficient to raise the grade of their Emperor Star Jade Medallion. This kind of wealth allowed 2 of the top 3 students to join the Knights Alliance. The first was Morongfeng, and the third was Du Hao. Morongfeng was at the 4th level of arterial circulation, while Du Hao was at the 3rd level. Evidently, Qin Wentian and Fan Lu had already been treated as members of the Green Cloud Association, and their cultivation bases were only at the 1st level of arterial circulation. The Knights Association had an overwhelming advantage in the battle proposed by Orkan. 2 silhouettes walked out from behind Orkan. These 2 silhouettes were none other than Morongfeng and Du Hao. Morongfeng was the strongest amongst this batch of new students, while Qin Wentian was the one with the highest potential. The gazes of the 2 of them intersected in mid-air. I admit that you have talent. In the future, you might have the qualifications to stand in front of me. But now, every time I hear people talking about me in the same breath as you, I can't help but sigh in my heart. Why are there so many idiots in the Emperor Star Academy? Morongfeng's voice was emotionless, causing the surrounding crowd to be in an uproar. Without any suspense, Morongfeng, who had defeated all his opponents and obtained the position of the top ranker, had the confidence to say such words. Being of the same age as Qin Wentian, he had his own pride, and he wouldn't allow anyone to blaspheme him. Chapter 53. Reaching the 4th level of arterial circulation at the age of 16. In the entire Chu country, this kind of talent was definitely at the peak. Not only that, Morongfeng's astral souls weren't weak either. His first astral soul originated from the 2nd heavenly layer, while his 2nd astral soul originated from the 3rd heavenly layer. He was the purest type of stellar martial cultivator, and only after condensing his astral souls did he start to temper his physique. He used a year and a half to perfect his physique and stepped into the arterial circulation realm. This kind of talent was already extremely rare. After all, not everyone could be like Qin Wentian. Using the astral energy from the 5th heavenly layer to temper his physique, as well as the tyrannical tempering method of the tempered 1000 hammer tempering technique, the effects of his physique would naturally be tens of times better than others. Morongfeng's words were very clear. Maybe in the future, Qin Wentian would have the ability to contend against him. But now, Qin Wentian didn't have the qualifications to be mentioned in the same breath as him. Qin Wentian didn't look at Morongfeng. Of course, it wasn't because of fear or trepidation. In truth, he didn't understand Morongfeng at all, and had no interest in understanding him. Regardless of how talented Morongfeng was, what did it have to do with him? But now that Morongfeng was representing the Knights Association, it had to do with him. Especially after the torture that Morongfeng had suffered not too long ago. Qin Wentian looked at Fan Le. "Can I make the decision?" Fan Le stared at Qin Wentian as he asked. "No matter what decision you make, I will accompany you." Qin Wentian laughed. "Of course, let's do it." Fatty laughed as he turned to Luo Huan. "Senior sister, since they want to play, let's play with them. Let's set the time for a month from now." "Are you sure?" Luo Huan glanced at Qin Wentian and Fan Le. These 2 people were going to be extremely troublesome to deal with. Fan Le shrugged his shoulders as he laughed. "I don't have that many yuan meteor stones. In that case, I can only use this method to raise the grade of my Emperor Star Jade Medallion." The top 3 in the Emperor Star Academy would be able to raise the grade of their medallion to the 3rd level. Since that's the case, why don't you raise your cultivation base to the 4th level in one go? In addition to the 202nd Heavenly Layer Yuan Meteor Stones as the wager, if you guys win, wouldn't you be able to directly raise your cultivation base to the 4th level? Orkan's words caused the surrounding crowd to draw in a breath of cold air. 202nd Layer Yuan Meteor Stones, to a new student, was an absolutely terrifying sum. 102nd Layer Yuan Meteor Stones were sufficient to upgrade the Jade Medallion to the 4th grade. Not only for the freshmen, but also for the Knights Association. This was a huge number, but he was sure that they would win. This was a battle without any suspense. Luo Huan's eyes narrowed. To the Qingyan Alliance, this number was still a huge pressure. Our Qingyan Alliance can still afford to fork out 200 Yuan Meteor Stones. The young man beside Luo Huan laughed. Luo Huan nodded her head, as she turned to Orkan and stated, "Firstly, I have to make 2 things clear. Firstly, Qin Wentian and Fan Lu are not members of our Qingyan Alliance. Our Qingyan Alliance only acted because we couldn't stand the despicable actions of your Knights Association. A bunch of old students ganging up on 2 newbies, how glorious is that? Secondly, our Qingyan Alliance will accept this bet. If we win, the wager belongs to Qin Wentian and Fan Lu. If we lose, the wager belongs to our Qingyan Alliance. Thirdly, our Qingyan Alliance will never be like the Knights Association, using benefits to entice people to join us. And for those who are willing to join us for benefits, we will never accept them, even if they have extraordinary talent." The young man beside Luo Huan added, as a faint smile hung on his face. This was the concept of the Qingyan Alliance. Their style was completely different from the Knights Association. This world was originally a world where the hearts of people were blinded by benefits. Why did they still want to bring this kind of atmosphere to the Emperor Star Academy? The Qingyan Alliance had always upheld this belief. Foolish. Orkan and the other members of the Knights Association also looked down on the Qingyan Alliance. They felt that if there were no benefits, why would they cooperate? All trust was built on the foundation of benefits. 1 month from now, I'm filled with anticipation. Orkan led the members of the Knights Association and departed. Morong Feng cast a deep glance at Qin Wentian and Fan Lu, as a strange expression appeared on his face. What kind of blind self-confidence is it that made you guys dare to accept the challenge? If the rules of the Emperor Star Academy were to be changed, things would be much better. Du Hao also felt that something was amiss, as he left with Morong Feng. Senior sister, are you the leader of the Qingyan Alliance? Qin Wentian stared at Luo Huan in bewilderment. However, Luo Huan shook her head as she smiled. I'm in charge of the matters of the Qingyan Alliance, while Orkan is in charge of the matters of the Knights Association. However, the leaders of the 2 alliances are Yuanfu cultivators. Why? Do you guys want to reconsider? That's not important. In any case, from today onwards, my first wish in the Emperor Star Academy is to make the Knights Association completely disappear from the Academy. A cold light flickered in Qin Wentian's eyes. He would definitely work hard for this goal. MHM, it doesn't matter if you join the Qingyan Alliance or not. However, you guys have to make good use of this 1 month's time. Luo Huan smiled. To defeat 2 of the top 3 in a month's time, the pressure was extremely great. Fatty should also work hard. Fan Lu narrowed his eyes as he laughed. Senior sister, boss, I'll return to cultivate first. Qin Wentian stared at Fatty's departing figure, feeling slightly moved. What happened in the Dream Sky Forest today had clearly affected Fatty greatly. Even if it wasn't for himself, but for Fatty, Qin Wentian still wanted to raise his strength within this 1 month. In a month's time, he should be able to step into the 2nd level of arterial circulation. If he wanted to raise his combat prowess further, he would have to rely on the spirit refinement method to condense his divine yuan energy, as well as the earth-grade innate technique, the 1,000 Hands imprint. All of these required a large amount of yuan meteor stones to support his cultivation. Seems like I have to make a trip to the Divine Weapon Pavilion. Qin Wentian murmured in his heart. He then turned to Luo Huan and asked, Senior sister, can I leave the academy anytime I want? Luo Huan naturally understood what Qin Wentian wanted to ask. Currently, Qin Wentian had offended both the Yi and O clan. Although he was very safe within the Emperor Star Academy, would he be safe once he exited? Be careful. Luo Huan smiled. Try not to give others the opportunity to assassinate you. If someone wants to deal with you, they still have to consider the Emperor Star Academy. Luo Huan believed that from the day Qin Wentian entered the academy, he had already been listed as one of the most important people in the academy. If someone wanted to deal with Qin Wentian, they would have to consider the Emperor Star Academy behind Qin Wentian. Qin Wentian nodded his head. He understood that there was nothing wrong with being careful. Even Orkan wanted nothing more than to kill him. It was just that he couldn't do so in the Emperor Star Academy. Work hard, junior brother. Your senior sister has high hopes for you. Luo Huan rubbed Qin Wentian's head, causing Qin Wentian to have a bitter smile on his face. Unknowingly, little rascal had already leapt onto Luo Huan's shoulder, rubbing its head against Luo Huan's face. Lecherous dog, let's go. Qin Wentian laughed as he turned and departed. Little rascal directly leapt down and followed Qin Wentian out of the academy. A human and a demonic beast strolled through the academy. The youth inclined his head slightly as the rays of the sun shone on his face. The corners of his mouth curled up in a faint smile. No matter how dense the dark clouds were, they were unable to block the dazzling rays of the sun. Luo Huan gazed at the back view of Qin Wentian. As the smile in her eyes grew even more intense, she was filled with anticipation for her two junior brothers. When would the future Qin Wentian be as dazzling as the sun? Many in the Emperor Star Academy stared at the departing figure of Qin Wentian as they wondered in their hearts. A month from now, would the first student in the history of the Emperor Star Academy to kill his opponent in the ranking battle be able to defeat Morong Feng? Qin Wentian arrived at the Divine Weapon Pavilion and looked for Francis. Francis brought 2 pieces of good news to Qin Wentian. The 3 divine weapons he had left behind would be auctioned off once in a while, causing a huge wave of commotion. The divine imprint that Qin Wentian had inscribed was named the Origin Returning Divine Imprint. Not only was it an amplification divine imprint, it also had the effect of storing origin energy. In times of danger, it could even save one's life. Not only that, there were many weaponsmiths who wanted to unravel this divine imprint. Hence, every time the Divine Weapon Pavilion held an auction, it would cause a huge wave of commotion. The second piece of good news was that after Francis had been promoted, he was able to come into contact with the second-level divine imprints of the Divine Weapon Pavilion. Currently, he had already stepped into the realm of a second-level weaponsmith, and his status had risen by a level. To Qin Wentian, this was extremely good news. As long as he continued to comprehend the origin returning divine imprint, he would be able to use even better materials to forge a second-level mid-grade divine weapon. At that time, it wouldn't be difficult for him to raise the grade of his Emperor Star Jade Medallion to the 5th level. At that time, he would be able to come into contact with extremely tyrannical earth-ranked innate techniques. Qin Wentian first forged a few divine weapons together with Francis, before handing them over to the Divine Weapon Pavilion, allowing them to pay some yuan meteor stones in advance for his cultivation. At the same time, he continued to comprehend the origin returning divine imprint. Half a month later, Qin Wentian and Francis finally managed to forge a second-level mid-grade divine weapon using the origin returning divine imprint, and handed it over to Yang Chen. Yang Chen was extremely excited, and he immediately started to advertise the divine imprint, causing a huge commotion as he waited for the auction to begin 3 days later. As for Qin Wentian himself, he had already entered the most crucial period of his cultivation. The arterial pathways in his body had already reached a limit, and this meant that he was only a single step away from stepping into the second level of the arterial circulation realm. Chapter 54. In the blink of an eye, 3 days had passed. Today was the day of the Divine Weapon Pavilion's auction. Although it was an auction, the Divine Weapon Pavilion did not have an official auction venue. The reason for this was because they wanted to raise the price of the divine weapons. This was also the usual method of the Divine Weapon Pavilion. As long as there were rare and precious divine weapons, They would be auctioned. At this moment, many people had gathered on the second level of the Divine Weapon Pavilion. Luckily, the Divine Weapon Pavilion was spacious enough to accommodate so many people. Many adventurers who had been active in the Dark Forest for a long time had come here. Even if they did not have enough wealth to purchase the legendary origin sword, they could still take a stroll around the Divine Weapon Pavilion to see if there was a divine weapon that they were satisfied with. Naturally, the competition for the origin sword was bound to involve the participation of weaponsmiths. Gretchen had also come to the Divine Weapon Pavilion today. She was different from many others. She was determined to obtain the origin sword. Coincidentally, she needed a good divine weapon. She had heard of the rumors about the origin sword before, and her heart was moved. Other than that, if she could auction it off, she would let her master Murin study it, and see if he could derive the divine imprints contained within. Accompanying Gretchen were a few of her companions, all of whom were students of the Royal Academy. Gretchen, other than being a disciple of Murin, was also a student of the Royal Academy. Fanla had also come today. These few days, Qin Wentian had not returned to the Divine Weapon Pavilion. Fanla knew that Qin Wentian was in the Divine Weapon Pavilion, and after asking around he found out that the Divine Weapon Pavilion would be auctioning off the origin sword today. Hence he came to look for Qin Wentian. Qin Wentian and Francis were also among the crowd. They were filled with anticipation, wondering how much this second-level divine weapon would fetch. "Boss!" At this moment, Qin Wentian heard Fan Li's voice. Turning his head, he discovered that Fan Lu and Sheena were walking over together. He couldn't help but smile. "Fatty, you're really something." "I'm only here out of curiosity." Sheena felt somewhat bashful when she saw the look in Qin Wentian's eyes. "Sheena's skin is thin, don't talk nonsense." Fatty laughed. However, Sheena is somewhat interested in that sword. "Oh." Qin Wentian cast a glance at Sheena, only to hear her reply. "The second astral soul I condensed is a sword astral soul. However, I'm afraid I won't be able to afford the origin returning sword. Let's see if there are any other divine weapons." As she spoke, Exian Rant's gaze turned towards the sword wall of the Divine Weapon Pavilion. There a sword hung there, radiating with light. Of course, it was impossible to judge the quality of the divine weapon just by looking at it. Only by channeling Yuan power into it would one be able to sense it. "Good sword." At this moment, a voice rang out from the crowd. Immediately, many gazes turned towards the owner of the voice. When they saw a young man drinking wine from a jug, the crowd couldn't help but laugh. "Immortal drunken wine, you haven't even touched the sword. How do you know if it's a good sword?" Someone said with a smile. "It's just a feeling." Immortal drunken wine placed his wine gourd down and looked at the person who spoke. He shook his head and said, "You don't understand." "Aha." Seeing the expression on Immortal drunken wine's face, many people laughed. Qin Wentian also laughed. This fellow was truly interesting. "She is Immortal drunken wine." Exian Ran stared at Immortal drunken wine, her eyes flashing with a strange light. "You know of him?" Qin Wentian asked. Immortal drunken wine, ranked third among the 10 prodigies of the royal capital. "Of course I've heard of him." Exian Ran replied as if it was a matter of course. This caused Qin Wentian to be slightly taken aback. This young man who liked to get drunk was actually ranked third among the 10 prodigies of the royal capital. The 10 prodigies refer to the 10 most outstanding geniuses in the royal capital below the age of 20. Exian Ran was somewhat taken aback. Wasn't Immortal drunken wine a little too easygoing? At this moment, Qin Wentian felt a cold glint of light shooting in his direction. Shifting his gaze over, his eyes narrowed. "Francis, it's you guys." Gretchen didn't expect that she would meet Qin Wentian and Francis in the Divine Weapon Pavilion. Previously, after returning to the royal capital from the Sky Harmony City, the Yi clan had sent over many resources, and Murin had allowed her to enter closed-door cultivation in the Star River Association. During this period of closed-door cultivation, Gretchen had successfully broken through the bottleneck of a first-level weaponsmith, becoming a young second-level weaponsmith. Just a few days ago, when she returned to the Royal Academy, the people around her all wanted to get closer to her after learning that she had become a second-level weaponsmith. A second-level weaponsmith didn't need to worry about connections or wealth. Not to mention, Gretchen was a second-level weaponsmith at such a young age. Gretchen's future was limitless, and if she could become a third-level weaponsmith in the future, she would definitely become one of the most sought-after characters in the Chu country. Even Yuanfu realm cultivators would need her help, and her wealth would be endless. The Divine Weapon Pavilion was extremely influential in the royal capital because they nurtured a group of weaponsmiths. The wealth of the Divine Weapon Pavilion was definitely terrifying. In this world, wealth was equivalent to cultivation resources, and with enough resources, experts could be nurtured. Humph. Francis coldly snorted when he saw Gretchen. He would never forget what Murin had done to him. And this disciple of Murin was also arrogant to the extreme in front of him. The two of you are actually together? A cold glint of light flashed in Gretchen's eyes, as she stared at Francis and Qin Wentian, who were standing together. After which she coldly stated, "Snakes and rats from the same nest? Boss, who is this girl?" Fan Lu stared at Qin Wentian, as his shifty eyes started to roam about Gretchen's body, causing Qin Wentian to silently despise him. As long as it was a girl, he wouldn't let it go. But of course, Gretchen was also a beauty to boot. However, Qin Wentian's impression of Gretchen wasn't very good. That day at the Star River Association, Murin had forced him to make a choice when he had nowhere else to go. This lady had used the same arrogant look in her eyes right now, telling him that with the status of the Qin clan, taking Murin as a disciple would be a great blessing to Qin Wentian, an honor to him. "I'm from the Star River Association, the disciple of a despicable weaponsmith," Qin Wentian replied. "Impudent." Gretchen's countenance turned cold, as a cold intent gushed forth from her body. "You actually dare to insult my master? Are you courting death? You are the impudent one. You've already done it, but you don't dare to admit it?" Francis coldly stated. "Murin and I are both from the Star River Association. Yet he forcefully snatched my divine imprint and refused to return it. Don't tell me you feel that's not despicable enough?" Gretchen stared at Francis. She didn't expect that the fellow who had been so submissive in the past would actually dare to insult her master, Murin. "Dog slave, if you don't kneel down and apologize for your words earlier, don't even think about leaving here alive today." Gretchen continued to look down at Francis with an arrogant gaze. In her eyes, Francis was nothing more than a slave, yet he dared to insult her master in front of her. If she didn't do anything, wouldn't she lose all her face if this matter were to spread to her master's ears? Upon hearing Gretchen's words, Francis's countenance turned extremely unsightly to behold. He, Francis, had always been a cautious person, and had always been submissive in front of those in the upper echelons. However, this was the first time he was insulted in such a manner. Not only that, the person who insulted him was a mere lass. Indeed, what kind of master will teach what kind of disciple? Qin Wentian stared at Gretchen. "The things that Murin did to me, just using the word despicable, is far from enough." Gretchen shifted her gaze onto Qin Wentian. That pair of cold and arrogant eyes of hers seriously scrutinized him. A strange smile gradually appeared on her face, and within that smile was an unmasked disdain. "I really don't understand. What gave you the courage to say such words? I hope that before the auction ends, you won't escape." As she spoke, Gretchen's gaze shifted to the sword rampart in front of her, as a cold light flickered in her eyes. The three people behind her also had cold, mocking smiles on their faces as they stared at Qin Wentian and Francis. Who would be so arrogant as to offend such a young second-level weaponsmith? Not only that, this genius weaponsmith was also a disciple of the Royal Academy, and the young miss of the Guan clan. "Boss, that girl's cultivation base is ordinary, only at the third level of arterial circulation. Of the three people behind her, two are at the second level of arterial circulation. As for the guy at the end, he's probably a tough nut to crack. His cultivation base should be at least at the fifth level of arterial circulation." Fan Lu whispered to Qin Wentian. If they were to make a move, it was best to first understand their opponent's strength. Only then would they be prepared. Qin Wentian lightly nodded his head, only to see Fatty laughing. "If we were to make a move, We should be able to take down that girl in an instant. As for the other three, they wouldn't even have the chance to act. You broke through? Qin Wentian's eyes shone with a bright light as he heard Fan Li's confident words. Fatty winked at him, as he laughed. You've already broken through to the second level of arterial circulation. Isn't it normal for me to break through as well? 2 nights ago, Qin Wentian had already used his tyrannical astral energy to break through the limits of his arterial circulation, opening up his second arterial circulation. Currently, his body could contain an even greater amount of astral energy, and with 2 arterial circulation meridians, he could sense every part of his body, regardless of whether it was his vision, hearing, or the power of his attacks. All of them had improved by leaps and bounds. Why do you sound as though I'm inferior to you? Qin Wentian said with disdain. I'm just stating a fact. Fatty laughed, as his eyes shone with a bright light. There's still 10 days left. I'm really looking forward to it. 200 yuan meteor stones, even the Knights Association would feel heartache. Chapter 55. Qin Wentian was also looking forward to the battle 10 days from now. Currently, both he and Fan Lo had broken through to the second level of arterial circulation. In addition to the Empyrean flame bloodline in Fan Li's body, there shouldn't be any problems dealing with Du Hao. As for Morongfeng, it would be somewhat difficult to deal with him. After all, Morongfeng's cultivation base was too high. Not only that, Qin Wentian didn't know if Morongfeng had any trump cards up his sleeves. Hence, in the next 10 days, Qin Wentian had to continuously raise his strength. Firstly, before the battle, he needed to store at least half of the divine energy in his body. This way, he would be able to contend against cultivators at the third level of arterial circulation, just by relying on the tyrannical strength of his divine energy. In addition to the mid-tier earth-grade innate technique, the Thousand Hands imprint, he would be able to put up a fight even against cultivators at the fourth level of arterial circulation. The problem now was, how strong was his opponent, Morongfeng? The Knights Association would definitely allow him to make sufficient preparations. To condense so much divine energy, yuan meteor stones were a must. After auctioning off the origin sword, there would be more than enough to spare. At this moment, Jianwu walked to the front of the sword rampart and smiled. The rules of the Divine Weapon Pavilion apply. Everyone can bid for the item, and we, the Divine Weapon Pavilion, will prioritize the highest bidder. Of course, the final decision rests with us. After all, we are not an official auction house, and we have the right to choose who to sell the item to. I'm sure everyone has heard of this origin sword. Its base price is 10 second-layer yuan meteor stones. Jianwu's lips curled into a smile, but her heart was slightly moved. For ordinary mid-tier second-layer divine weapons, 3 or 4 second-layer yuan meteor stones would be sufficient. But for this origin sword, the price would definitely be raised to a terrifying level. Of course, if there were friends from the Divine Weapon Pavilion who participated in the auction, even if the price wasn't high, the Divine Weapon Pavilion would still give it to them. This was the style of the Divine Weapon Pavilion. Now we can begin. Jianwu laughed. 30. A calm voice drifted out from the crowd as an old man walked towards the sword rampart. It's Old Man Han. Seems like there's no hope at all. Many cursed in their hearts. The price of 30 was already enough to cause many people to shrink back. I like this sword, but I only have a total of 35 yuan meteor stones on me. Let's use them all and hope that our luck isn't bad. Immortal Drunken Wine indifferently stated as he walked to the front, as the crowd parted ways for him. 40. A few silhouettes appeared at the front of the crowd. It was Gretchen and the others. These 3 bids had directly drowned the hopes of the crowd. This price was too terrifying. Motherfucker, this daddy here risked his life to hunt demonic beasts, and even rolled around in front of the Grim Reaper for over 10 years. Even now, I only have 10 second-layer heavenly astral meteor stones. Look at them. A burly man cursed in a low voice. Many in the crowd felt the same way. Indeed, the disparity between humans was too great. Qin Wentian sighed in his heart. This was the royal capital. If it was the Sky Harmony City, There wouldn't even be any second heavenly layer Yuan meteor stones circulating in the market. The first heavenly layer Yuan meteor stones were all treated as treasures by the various great clans, and were all traded using Yuan stones. This was the disparity between them. Of course, Qin Wentian had forgotten about this, because this was the Divine Weapon Pavilion. The slum district and chaos district of the royal capital weren't as wealthy as this. Gretchen's bid caused the entire hall to fall silent. For a heavyweight auction, there wouldn't be many bids. Maybe a few bids would be sufficient to determine the owner of the treasure. The majority of the people present were just there to serve as foils. Qin Wentian obviously didn't want to be a foil. Since Gretchen was so wealthy, he might as well extort some money from her. It's the last from the Guang clan. I heard that you've already become a second-level weaponsmith. This old man here is truly impressed. This old man shall not compete with you any further. Old Han politely replied. He himself was also a second-level weaponsmith. Gretchen nodded her head to Old Han, returning the courtesy. She didn't bother with pleasantries. In the future, there would be many people who wished to befriend her. 41. Qin Wentian walked up as he calmly bid, with a faint smile on his face. Immortal Drunken Wine couldn't help but be taken aback when he heard Qin Wentian's bid. After which, he drank a mouthful of wine as a smile appeared on his face. He knew very well who forged this sword. Gretchen's countenance turned cold as she stared at Qin Wentian. Are you intentionally trying to cause trouble? Are you going to bid or not? Qin Wentian swept a glance at Gretchen. 45. Gretchen stared at Qin Wentian as she spoke. 46. Qin Wentian laughed as he continued bidding. Sword of Origin. Aren't you afraid that it'll burn your hand? A person beside Gretchen stared at Qin Wentian, a hint of threat flashing in his eyes. Don't worry, after I bid for it, I can give it to someone else. For example, Immortal Drunken Wine. I don't have much, but I do have a lot of Yuan meteor stones. Qin Wentian shrugged his shoulders. You. That person's countenance faltered. Gretchen glanced at Jianwu. Do you want to check his Yuan meteor stones first? Maybe he doesn't have so many. This is a matter of my Divine Weapon Pavilion. There's no need for Miss Gretchen to worry. Are you willing to show your Yuan meteor stones to others? If you are willing, I wouldn't mind. Yang Chen, who was standing beside Jianwu, smiled, causing Gretchen's countenance to turn unsightly. 50. Gretchen coldly replied. 51. Qin Wentian directly bid. 55. Gretchen gritted her teeth. After she broke through to the second level, the Star River Association and her clan had given her resources to support her cultivation. In addition to her previous wealth, she only had 60 Yuan meteor stones on her. But if she were to use them to bid for the origin sword, she would soon run out. 56. Fatty laughed, continuing Qin Wentian's words. Qin Wentian glanced at Fatty, and his laughter grew even more joyous. This fellow was proficient in the power of will, and had an extremely strong judgment ability. Maybe he would be able to discern something from Gretchen's expression. 57. Gretchen's voice was cold to the extreme. She wouldn't lack Yuan meteor stones in the future, but she couldn't afford to lose face today. As for Qin Wentian, she would deal with him after she obtained the origin sword. 58. Fatty smiled radiantly. 56. Gretchen's voice grew louder, and the entire Divine Weapon Pavilion fell silent. The price had actually risen to a terrifying 60 Yuan meteor stones. This was madness. This was madness. TSK, beautiful lady, you are so rich. I can't afford it. Fatty flashed his signature wretched smile at Gretchen, causing Gretchen's countenance to stiffen. 60-second heavenly layer Yuan meteor stones. Only to purchase a second-level mid-tier sword. Although this sword was extraordinary, it still caused her heart to bleed. I don't want it either. Qin Wentian shrugged, winking at Fatty. 30-second heavenly layer Yuan meteor stones landed in his pocket just like that. Boss. Fatty gave Qin Wentian a you-know look, indicating that Qin Wentian shouldn't forget about his benefits. Is there anyone else who wants to bid? Jianwu laughed as she stared at the crowd. Bid my ass, this is too terrifying. I think I'd better go to the first level to take a look. Someone cursed rudely, causing the crowd to laugh. Indeed, this price was too terrifying. It was sufficient to purchase a second-level high-tier divine weapon. Since this is the case, Miss Gretchen. Jianwu smiled at Gretchen, causing Gretchen's heart to twitch. After which, she passed all the yuan meteor stones she had brought with her to Jianwu, while Jianwu retrieved the sword and passed it to Gretchen. Although Gretchen had obtained the origin sword, she didn't feel any joy at all. Her cold eyes swept over to Qin Wentian and Fan Lu, flickering with a killing intent. Next, it's time for us to settle our debts. Gretchen stared at Qin Wentian and Feng Ping as she spoke. How do you want to play? One-on-one or a group battle? Fan Lu narrowed his eyes as he stared at the four people in front of him. Upon hearing Fan Li's words, Gretchen and the other three all laughed, as though they had heard something extremely amusing. One-on-one group battle? Are you guys even worthy? Behind Gretchen, the young man with the higher cultivation base took a step forward, sweeping his gaze over to Qin Wentian and the others as he stated, "If you guys kneel down and kowtow to Gretchen in apology, I will spare your lowly lives today." Wang Chang's gaze flickered with a hint of mockery. He truly couldn't understand why these people in front of him would have the courage to talk back to Gretchen. But of course, he was more than happy to see such a situation. If not, how would he have the chance to show off? Ever since Gretchen became a second-level weaponsmith, there were many who wanted to form a relationship with her. Scram. An indifferent voice drifted over. Wang Chang's countenance stiffened. Who was so audacious to tell him to scram? Shifting his gaze over, he saw a young man drinking from a gourd of wine. That voice earlier had originated from his mouth. Wang Chang's countenance stiffened as his countenance turned ashen. Immortal drunken wine, this matter has nothing to do with you. Wang Chang coldly stated. I can't stand it, can I? Immortal drunken wine laughed in a carefree manner. Even if I don't tell you to scram, there will be others who will. Since Gretchen has a grudge with them, you should settle it yourself. If you dare to make a move, the one kneeling here today will definitely be you. Immortal drunken wine shook his wine gourd as he said this, before adding in a depressed tone. Oh no, there's no more wine. The crowd was speechless. This fellow's words were really too big. After we settle this matter, I will treat you to a drink. Qin Wentian smiled as he looked at Immortal drunken wine. Immortal drunken wine's eyes lit up as he laughed. Since you said it, don't go back on your words. My alcohol tolerance isn't small. Don't worry about getting drunk. Qin Wentian laughed as well. He really liked Immortal drunken wine's personality. Towards someone he liked, they could become friends. Good, it seems like I can drink big today. Immortal drunken wine was filled with anticipation. He knew that the 60 yuan meteor stones contributed by Gretchen earlier was half of Qin Wentian's share. Chapter 56. The two of them chatted as though no one else was present, causing Gretchen's countenance to grow increasingly unhappy. She didn't expect that Immortal drunken wine would actually help Qin Wentian. The third-ranked prodigy of the royal capital, Immortal drunken wine, wasn't an existence that could be trifled with. I didn't expect to find a backer so quickly. Gretchen indifferently glanced at Qin Wentian. But do you really think that I need a helper to deal with you? When Murin and Gretchen were in the Sky Harmony City, they had already investigated Qin Wentian thoroughly. At that time, Qin Wentian had displayed outstanding talent, condensing an astral soul from the third heavenly layer, and had even used some special methods to kill Yi Lang. Now that 3 months had passed, even if Qin Wentian's strength had improved a little, what could he do? As for the demonic ape that appeared in the Star River Association, Murin told her that it was a summoned astral warbeast. It was highly possible that it was a life-saving talisman left behind by the ancestor of the Qin clan, the Wu King. What kind of talent can a clan that's on the verge of collapse nurture? Gretchen coldly laughed as she turned and commanded, "Leave." Although Gretchen was arrogant, she wasn't so arrogant that she would directly make a move in the Divine Weapon Pavilion. Those beside Gretchen all laughed as they stared at Qin Wentian, with expressions of ridicule on their faces. What a reckless fool. Interesting. The surrounding spectators all had the attitude of watching a good show. Qin Wentian and the rest lifted their feet as they asked Francis, "Are all weaponsmiths so arrogant?" "Powerful weaponsmiths all have an innate arrogance." Francis laughed. "I was just a first-level weaponsmith in the past, but you've seen me before." As he spoke, Francis looked at Qin Wentian with some embarrassment. Qin Wentian laughed. Indeed, when he first met Francis, this fellow was also extremely arrogant in front of him. After exiting the Divine Weapon Pavilion, Gretchen turned around and stared at Qin Wentian, as a cold light flashed in her eyes. Earlier, Qin Wentian had intentionally bid against her, causing her to suffer a great loss. Just this point alone was enough for Qin Wentian to pay with his life. She wants to kill. Fan Li's eyes narrowed. This woman wasn't simply arrogant. Her heart was extremely vicious as well. She actually wanted to kill him. Buzz. All of a sudden, Gretchen moved. Her movements were graceful and agile, as fast as lightning. A ray of sword light bloomed abruptly, revealing a chilling intent. The sword slashed directly at Qin Wentian's body. What a fast sword! The crowd was stunned. Gretchen wanted to kill Qin Wentian. A terrifying aura emanated from Qin Wentian's palm. After cultivating the 1,000-hand imprint for so long, it was time for him to put it into practice. With a stomp of his foot, the ground trembled. Qin Wentian's entire being seemed to be filled with explosive strength as he directly blasted out a palm strike. A terrifying palm imprint exuded a fearsome might as golden light radiated from it. This was none other than the first stance of the 1,000 Hands imprint, the adamantine imprint. Gretchen's sword condensed from astral energy directly exploded. She didn't even have the time to unleash the full might of her sword technique before she was completely suppressed. The 1,000 Hands imprint was known for its tyrannical attacks. Not only that, Qin Wentian's astral energy originated from the 5th heavenly layer, along with the tyrannical might of the heavenly hammer constellation. Even if he didn't use his divine yuan energy, the power of his attacks would still be extremely terrifying. Boom boom. Qin Wentian stomped on the ground as he dashed towards Gretchen. Both his palms simultaneously blasted out as two terrifying imprints pressed downwards. Gretchen's countenance instantly paled. She immediately pulled out the origin sword she had just obtained, and at the same time, released her sword-type astral soul. Single slash sword light blossomed, forcefully shattering one of the adamantine imprints. However, the other palm imprint closed in on her, and she could only hurriedly raise her hands in response. A muffled boom rang out, and Gretchen felt as though her arms were about to shatter. At the same time, fresh blood seeped out from the corners of her mouth. Qin Wentian didn't give Gretchen any chance to retaliate. The roars of a dragon echoed out as an enraged dragon's arm directly snatched away the origin sword in Gretchen's hands. After which, a fist smashed into Gretchen's body, causing Gretchen to be flung through the air as she fell heavily onto the ground. The battle ended in an instant. The spectators were all dumbfounded as they watched the results of the battle. This fellow's attacks were too tyrannical. After seizing the initiative, he unleashed a torrent of attacks that directly destroyed Gretchen. Wang Chong and the rest dashed forward, only to see Immortal Drunken Wine taking a step forward as a terrifying sword chi enveloped the entire space, causing Wang Chong and the rest to freeze in place. At the same time, Qin Wentian had already arrived in front of Gretchen. Standing there, he lowered his head and looked down at Gretchen, who was sitting on the ground. A faint smile could be seen on his face as he held the origin sword in his hands. As long as he pierced downwards, Gretchen would definitely die. I really don't understand what you have to be so proud of. Qin Wentian calmly stated. Traces of mockery could be seen in his eyes, piercing into Gretchen's heart. She had never suffered such humiliation before. But today, she was defeated by her opponent. She had nothing to say. The pain of being defeated, as well as this humiliation, was extremely painful. Immortal Drunken Wine, if something really happens to Gretchen, I'm afraid you won't be able to bear the consequences. Wang Chong coldly stared at Immortal Drunken Wine, who was blocking his path before shifting his gaze onto Qin Wentian. And you take your sword away. Immortal Drunken Wine laughed. If I were you, I would immediately shut my mouth. If not, if he really killed Gretchen, things wouldn't be too good. Gretchen is a student of the Royal Academy and a second-level weaponsmith from the Star River Association, Wang Chong coldly stated. A month ago, he killed Orphan in front of Orkhan and many other elders of the Emperor Star Academy. If you continue to anger him, don't blame me for not warning you. Immortal Drunken Wine casually shrugged his shoulders. Qin Wentian from the Emperor Star Academy. The countenance of a student from the Royal Academy stiffened. Evidently, the news of Qin Wentian's deeds in the Emperor Star Academy had long been spread throughout the Royal Academy. It was only because a month had passed that Gretchen, who had just returned to the academy, didn't know about it. He killed Orphan. Gretchen sat up, staring at her companion as she asked. Yes, in the Emperor Star Academy's ranking competition. In front of everyone on the arena. That person nodded his head, glancing at Qin Wentian as he continued. Not only that, his two astral souls originated from the third and fourth heavenly layers respectively. The Emperor Star Academy only confined him for a month. Gretchen's countenance turned strange as she stared at the smiling youth. In just a span of 3 months, he had already completed his transformation? Can I trouble you to pass this message to Murin that I will find him for that debt in the future? Scram now. Qin Wentian tossed the origin sword to the ground, as Gretchen stood up and left in a sorry state. Qin Wentian had actually entered the Emperor Star Academy, and had such talent. This caused a huge impact to her heart. Qin Wentian didn't kill Gretchen. He was very clear of his current situation in the royal capital. The Yi clan and the O clan had no leeway to salvage the situation. Although he had already entered the Emperor Star Academy, he didn't think that he would be able to rest easy. On the contrary, there were many people who wanted him dead. Regardless of the Emperor Star Academy, the Divine Weapon Pavilion, or even Immortal Drunken Wine, this wasn't his own strength. Only when he was strong enough to contend against everything would he have the qualifications to do whatever he wanted. Qin Wentian shifted his gaze towards Immortal Drunken Wine, only to see Immortal Drunken Wine laughing. Care about being drunk? Care about being drunk? Qin Wentian smiled as he nodded his head. Where are we going? Wherever we go. You just have to pay the bill. Immortal Drunken Wine laughed. Qin Wentian shrugged his shoulders as he turned to Sheena and Fan Le. Fatty, what about the two of you? Hehe. Fatty blinked his eyes as he laughed. How about this, Sheena? You go pick a divine weapon and put it on Boss tab. I will go out with Boss for a walk. This? Sheena stared at Qin Wentian in bewilderment. Francis, bring Sheena along. Just put it on my tab. Qin Wentian spoke to Francis as he rolled his eyes at Fatty. This damnable Fatty kept calling him boss every day. He would have to pay the price for it. Sheena, there's no need to be so polite with boss. Fatty had a wretched smile on his face. He had personally witnessed the wealth of weaponsmiths. In the future, he would definitely extort more from them. Francis brought Sheena to the Divine Weapon Pavilion, while Qin Wentian and the other two headed in another direction. Fatty sized up Immortal Drunken Wine as he asked. Ranked third among the 10 prodigies of the royal capital, you should be very strong, right? Not bad. Immortal Drunken Wine looked at Fatty with interest. If that's the case, after drinking, we will all be brothers. If I need your help in a fight, it shouldn't be a problem, right? Fatty's eyes lit up, while Qin Wentian rolled his eyes. This fellow's calculations were quite good. If he could invite Immortal Drunken Wine for a fight, killing Orkhan wouldn't be a problem at all. As long as you get drunk, there's no problem in fighting. Just don't make me kick an iron board. Immortal Drunken Wine laughed as he replied. Fatty's eyes lit up. Qin Wentian, when are you able to forge a second-level high-grade origin sword? Remember to give me one. Immortal Drunken Wine looked at Qin Wentian. No problem. Qin Wentian nodded his head. Immortal Drunken Wine had a carefree personality. He didn't mind asking him for a divine weapon. If it was an ordinary person, they would have definitely avoided it. Back at the Knights Association, Orkhan, Morongfeng and the rest were gathered together. Orkhan stared at Morongfeng as he spoke. Today a battle took place outside the Divine Weapon Pavilion. Qin Wentian's cultivation has already broken through to the second level of arterial circulation. Not only that, Mustang should have imparted to him the Earth-grade innate technique, The Thousand Hands Imprint. He has already mastered the first stance of the diamond imprint. Do you think he can threaten me? Morong Feng stared at Orkan. At the very least, we can't be too careless. Back then in the dark forest, I thought he would die, but in the end, the one who died was my younger brother. We can't let go of this opportunity. I will give you an earth-grade innate technique for you to cultivate. Also, do you want to raise your Emperor Star Jade Medallion to the 5th level? Morong Feng's eyes narrowed. With a 5th grade Emperor Star Jade Medallion, he would be able to enjoy even better cultivation resources. To him, this was undoubtedly a great temptation. However, he didn't have enough Yuan meteor stones. Of course. Morong Feng nodded. In a battle on the platform, it's hard to avoid situations where one cannot hold back. If Qin Wentian is crippled, I can guarantee that you will be able to reach the 5th level. A cold light flickered in Orkan's eyes. As long as he crippled Qin Wentian, the Emperor Star Academy would no longer nurture trash. Qin Wentian would die without a doubt. The Yi clan and O clan would be willing to provide the 300 Yuan meteor stones. Morong Feng's eyes narrowed. The Academy wanted him to take the risk. If he really crippled Qin Wentian, what would the Emperor Star Academy's attitude be? This is a fair battle. With us here, the Emperor Star Academy won't make things difficult for a genius for the sake of a crippled Qin Wentian. Orkan's eyes were as cold as ice. Upon hearing his words, Morong Feng's eyes flickered with a ruthless glint. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.